Now in this sharing, you're about to see how this truth has completely freaked out and scared these informants who really wanted to think that they were in a position to handle this level of truth. As like within this video here, they were only accustomed to dealing with those who falsely were claiming to be the Christ and were just so ingrained in dealing with falsehoods that they themselves had no idea how to deal with truth, let alone they themselves being even more fake than whoever was falsely believing that they themselves were the Christ, the Mashiach. So here we're going to walk through what terrified these people who wanted to consider themselves specialists when it comes to this nature of truth. So here we're going to review what was too much for our little cowardly informants here that chose to run instead of facing the truth, which of course will come with its own consequences, as any of these cowards' children will of course see this in the future. And of course, it wouldn't take long for any woman to see right to the cowardice of these clowns, let alone when they are able to recognize truth so quickly, leaving these literal low-level intelligence weaklings to wish they were spoken of in manners such as this.
Well, his temperament is amazing. I mean, you call yourself Christ, I guess you gotta be. He's very good with handling the pressure.
So being as that these women really don't find you kids aesthetically attractive whatsoever, and just like you thought you were running around playing others is basically what they're having to do to you, how long do you really think any of them associating themselves with you actually is going to last, let alone when they know that in the sight of any pressure that you kids could not handle and ultimately fold, as ugly as you kids are, you would still betray them in a heartbeat, and they know it. And this why you pitiful punks will wallow in your envy, being as no grown woman with all of her faculties about her will ever talk about any of you cowards like this.
Well, his temperament is amazing. I mean, you call yourself Christ, I guess you gotta be. He's very good with handling the pressure.
And though there are those who would want to twist this as the line of David, in essence trying to take somebody's wife or woman, like they like to try to twist the Bathsheba story, forgetting that King David made Uriah stay with him, obviously to know truly all the more what exactly the case was with him. These kids wouldn't even fit such circumstances, and similar to Deuteronomy 21, well, if they ever need asylum, just like I wrote out in this message here, of course, how could the king deny them? And as we aren't in the desert, needing to keep the camp purified of things such as lice, of course there would be no need to touch their beautiful hair, unless they themselves wish to cut it, of course, for their own reasons, their own purposes, as they are beautiful whether their hair is as quote short as mine or down to their ankles. So now without further ado, we will go ahead and review this slaughter.
What's going on, Landy?
I'm here, Angel.
What's going on, A9?
Peace and blessing. You know what it is, all praise to the Most High. Let's go ahead and get this false Messiah up out of here.
And being as these kids already terrified. Just as I said, I'm really not trying to scare them when I say what I will here next. However, it is completely simply reality that you kids who literally dare try to mention God to then just begin lying through your little punk teeth, you kids will pay, obviously beyond your imagination. Now back to their little charades being crushed.
All right. So, is any suggestions before we begin? Any extensions of the premise, or did we get a customized premise, or are we going with the standard format?
5:15, and everything else standard.
Okay. All right. So y'all heard the man. 5-minute opening, 15-minute premise, 10 minutes for the rebuttal and rapid fire round, and a 5-minute closing. Landy is the affirmative, so he is set to go up first. We're going to go ahead and set the timer for 5 minutes. Set the timer for 5 minutes. And it is on you, Landy. Whenever you're ready, you can begin.
Now here you see just how easily lying comes to this little clown, being as that, as you see here, I sent him over the opening and the premise to this debate for him to play. And instead of just stating that he was going to play it, again, he just had to make himself look all the more like the liar that he is, as you just heard him do. You also see here that the clown was already sending this opening and of course ultimately the premise to others hours prior to this debate, which proves all the more, as you're about to see soon, that these cowards made up their mind that they were just going to run even before this debate started. So now we will move on to the opening. Being the promised biblical Davidic Messiah, addressing this fully would indeed take more than a 5-minute introduction with a 15-minute premise. So what I'm going to do is address the criteria that my so-called opponent thought would help him, and then off of what is valid, show further evidence as to this reality. First, we're going to address Anonymous being a liar or having severe cases of brain fog. It has been stated by this person that my messianic claim is fundamentally flawed. So here we will see how it is indeed him who is fundamentally flawed, beginning with his criteria of what is ultimately Romanized Messianic Christian interpretations. First, after being educated as to the fact that they are indeed flawed, he then stated that he would not try to hold me to Romanized doctrine.
So I'm never going to hold you to Roman Catholicized doctrine.
And here, as part of his criteria, he lists Orthodox and Hasidic Jewish perspectives after stating that I am trying to give a messianic profile based off of what some man is stating, while he is going off of the Bible, and that we cannot go off of the word of man.
You're giving me a Messiah profile based on a man, based on what some man has said. I'm going to give you a Messianic or Messianic profile based upon the Bible, right? And we cannot sit here and stand on man's doctrine, right? We cannot. We have to stand on what the scriptures teach us.
And though the Bible was written by men inspired by God, I pointed out to him in the way that he meant it, that it was indeed him going off of what men were teaching, as the Romans twisted up God's original teachings. Then he contradicts himself even further when I point out to him that the genealogy in Luke does not match with that of Genesis, and Chronicles, and he states that all of his New Testament beliefs comes from what is derived from the Torah through the Tanakh.
Because you don't like the name that's added in the genealogy of Luke is not good enough, right? So
what? Whoa. Now, hold on. If someone tells me that when they look at the book of Luke and it doesn't match Genesis, it doesn't match Chronicles, to just say, oh, that's okay, that then is...
Oh, no, I didn't say it was okay. I disagree with your interpretation of what it would say, and I also disagree with what your interpretation of whose lineage it is and by which way we get to.
Okay,
so that's why I said if you wanted to debate the lineage, right, but in the debate, I'll show you why I think that is not Messiah Yeshua's lineage by way of Joseph.
Now here he will need to explain how he disagrees with my interpretation of what this is saying. As you see here, there is a person added between Arphaxad and Shelah, unlike Genesis and unlike Chronicles.
That is not Messiah Yeshua's lineage by way of Joseph.
And further adding to his flawed criteria, done so by man. In his very book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 3, it states that the Son of God was born of the seed of David. So any trying to interpret Mary coming from Nathan, David's son, would completely contradict Genesis 38, verse 9, when a son of Judah was punished for spilling his seed on the ground.
That's why I tell you, everything that I'm going to do, any belief that I have that comes from the New Testament is filtered through the Torah. That's first off.
And speaking of not going by Romanized doctrine, it is held that Luke is a companion of Paul, charged by the Ebionites, actual Hebrews, for being a Roman. And further contradicting flaw in his approach is him stating that his standpoint starts in the Torah and goes through the Tanakh.
It starts in the Torah, then continues all the way through the Tanakh.
Yet writing here of resurrection without addressing the resurrection in Ezekiel chapter 37. So in the premise, we will address the appropriate messianic profile.
All right. Shout out to Landy, the Christ. We're going to pass this rock now over to Anonymous. Let me go ahead and bring your information up. All right, you gotta
Mic check. You can hear me, Sola?
Yeah, we can hear you. You gotta. All right, so whenever you're ready, yes, we can see.
Hey, make sure it's moving correctly. It's moving.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm finna cook, dude. Tell me when you're ready.
When you start talking, I'm gonna start the timer.
All right. Let's get it. Welcome home to me. If ain't nobody else gonna say it, I say it to myself. As you heard already, we're just gonna get a bunch of gish gallop, red herrings, and non sequitur arguments. Let's have some fun. The false Messiah, exposing Landy Christ. That's right. I'm home, family. A9 verse Landy, the false Messiah. Is Landy Christ the promised biblical Davidic Messiah? And as we can see, he already running. He already want to talk more about me than talk about qualifying who he is. Let's get it. All right, let me get this quick disclaimer. Before I begin, let me make one thing abundantly clear. This is not a rebuttal, all right? I am not rebuttaling. Although you'll hear me speak directly about Landy Christ throughout my opening and premise, it is only because he is the subject of the debate. Just as one would reference an author when debating economic theory, or a CEO when discussing a corporate leadership meeting, mentioning Landy is a function of the topic. It's not retaliation. Again, I repeat for clarity, this is not a rebuttal. Let's cook. I have a 5-point major argument that I'm putting forward today, all right? And I'm going to break it down, and it breaks down like this. My first point, and I'll start here. Knowing this first, that no prophecy of the scripture is a private interpretation. I'm going to prove to you today that this brother has a private interpretation and a self-fulfilling prophecy. He is created his own form of doing this thing simply because, like he said, when we had our conversation, it's not written in a book. But I thought we were supposed to be talking about the Bible.
Now, which one of you are sharp enough to notice that this fool just began speaking of private interpretations of scripture, aka within the Bible?
No prophecy of the scripture is a private interpretation. I'm going to prove to you today that this brother has a private interpretation.
And then stated that what I am talking about is not in the Bible.
He has created his own form of doing this thing simply because, like he said, when we had our conversation, it's not written in a book. But I thought we were supposed to be talking about the Bible.
And as you're going to see further examples of, as you see here as evident with this fool wearing a mask on his face, of course having 1 foot in one door and 1 foot out of it, fits the description in James 1:8 that a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. And of course, as we saw here, this going for all of his thoughts and all of his deeds. And as the Switchfoot song goes, where do you run to escape from yourself? Where are you going to go? Just as I wrote him here, let's see how wearing a mask helps him from hiding from himself, let alone thinking that those who actually know him are not going to recognize this punk's voice. Though like the dishonorable little coward that he is, he's more concerned with upsetting whatever customers he's trying to sell property or houses or apartment complexes to, seeing him for the liar that he is, than he is his own family. Let alone beyond that, where do you think you're hiding from God itself?
My first argument, Landy's inconsistencies within his self-created profile. Look how goofy he look.
Now, how undeveloped must your mind be to make up some animation and then try to say, look how goofy I look, all the while when they are wearing a mask? How goofy do those that know this kid know that he looks, let alone when anyone that he may like or think that likes him actually see me by the grace of God? Then start to thinking what it must be like to be able to be with someone whose breath does not smell like decayed flesh, let alone have me actually looking into their eyes. One thing these women will always know that you cowards do not is that they are never intimidated when I am looking at them, unlike you weak, cowardly little pretenders.
Let's keep going. See, here's the problem. Like you see that confetti rising up in the air, that's what he's going to do today with his argument. He's going to throw things on the wall to see what sticks. We call that a gish gallop. So as we go through here, I want you to pay attention to the argument and then pay attention to how I address it, because it's clearly not going to be coherent. My argument number 2, we're going to line his false claim up against the Messianic Christian profile. Like he said, oh, you're not going to judge me according to the Roman Catholicism. That's your choice. You can say that. I told you I was going to deal with the Bible.
So I'm never going to hold you to Roman Catholicized doctrine.
Not only, of course, do I not fit that, but of course you will never see that ever, because it is indeed a Roman fairy tale. So
I don't believe in the ghost army coming back. I don't want you to feel like I'm going to show up and say, oh, you got to show up with an army. No, right? Like, that's why I tell you, I'm a Roman Catholic. I'm not even classified technically as a Sunday believer Christian type. I'm not even one of these Hebrew Israelite Christians. These Hebrew Christian Israelites who still hold on to a lot of this hocus pocus. Okay, so
as here you're seeing all the more the liar that this cowardly clown actually is.
The conversation is about the Bible. So today, when we deal with the Bible, we're going to find out whether or not this brother lines up with prophetic understanding about how the Messiah would come and how we would know whom he is. All right, let's keep it moving. My third argument, and this is going to be probably my favorite, right? Landy's false claims against the Orthodox and the Hasidic Judaic messianic profile, right? That is going to be one of the linchpins. Not so much that we're going to go into depth, but simply because we're going to point out that him dealing with a lot of information from a Hasidic rabbi, i.e. Rabbi Ginsburg, if he has the heart to bring him up today, and then to say that the conversation is now Roman Catholicized shows the inconsistency, and it shows his inability to stay on topic and correctly deal with the argument.
Now, once more, this kid is shown to be just a complete imbecile. He just went from saying that I'm dealing with information from a Hasidic rabbi to then saying that in essence that Romanizes this conversation. This kid is an imbecile.
Dealing with a lot of information from a Hasidic rabbi, i.e. Rabbi Ginsburg, if he has the heart to bring him up today, and then to say that the conversation is now Roman Catholicized.
Now here we see that years after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem, that Rabbi Akiva believed that Bar Kokhba was indeed the Messiah, Bar Kokhba who led a rebellion against Rome.
Yes, I'm familiar with the Bar Kokhba revolt. I'm with you.
Excellent. Now, there are those that hold that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah. Now, the thing is, excellent. There are those that hold that Bar Kokhba was the Messiah to come. And the thing was, of course, as we know, Bar Kokhba ended up passing away in these wars. Now, it did not mean that Bar Kokhba didn't have a son, which happened to be the line of David. This nobody knows. There's no way to prove that, because they stated, hey, is Bar Kokhba the Messiah? Now, it did not mean that Bar Kokhba could not be in the line of David, as many held that he was. But the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of these messianic prophecies, you're only able to verify them after they happen. This is why you have so many angels that hold that when the Mashiach comes, he's going to rebuild the temple. And that's how I will know the Mashiach comes. Not this foreshadowing of this, or this guy kind of looks like that. It'll be when this temple is completed. So this is why.
So you know.
This is why he's going to be proven today as the false Messiah that he is. My argument number 4, all right? And this is real. The historical patterns of false messiahs, especially from a mental health perspective. Now, I'm not going to go deep into a mental health bag, but I am going to educate you as to what following someone like this would lead to, right? Someone who's volatile when their information is challenged and they actually want to challenge you to a fight. Someone who gets to the point where they're so angry that they want to fight you and call you out of your name and threaten to hurt you and all of those things because their information was challenged. Is that really the signs of a false messiah or the signs of a maniac? That's what we're going to deal with today. Not calling him a maniac, but this argument is a maniacal argument.
Now, in another conversation that we had, which was not sent over to me, of course, he became emotional and began to yell because, of course, he was getting stomped out, mentally outweighed, and began to express himself like an emotionally handicapped child. And of course, him doing this only because we're not in person, I bring up the fact that if he's yelling like this, he could come in person and we can simply go over to a boxing gym or whatever it is that he thinks he would like to do. And then of course he shrunk immediately and tried to pull this type of nonsense. We're going to revisit this subject one more time, as when he was yelling, I simply brought up the fact that if his quote fiance, as it was presented to me that she was around, then she's hearing him yell like a B word. That was the only thing outside of his name that I called him, a B word, literally put just like that, verbatim, B word. and her obviously seeing the kind of clown she was getting involved with, who yells a whole lot, but then when it comes time to action, wants to shrink and disappear behind a mask. And when we delve even deeper into the psychology of this pretender, we see that his actions betray him, as there was a whole lot of rhetoric there, but notice he wanted to be clear. He didn't call me, who he claimed was doing those things, a maniac.
Not calling him a maniac, but not calling him a maniac, but not calling him a maniac, but this argument is a maniacal argument.
I think, you have a very coherent argument.
This argument is a maniacal argument.
I think, you have a very coherent argument.
As we see, there's a problem with these liars trying to keep up with all of their lies, let alone when they love those chicken wings and whatever flesh so much that even at the cost of whatever imbalances causes this type of brain fog, they still won't let it go. Now, after just watching that little chemically unbalanced contradiction,
this argument is a maniacal argument.
I think, you have a very coherent argument.
here we are about to take a look at another one that whatever women, let alone family members, should really start to take note at these so-called inconsistencies.
My fifth, and this is the linchpin. My fifth argument is the linchpin. Understand this. His premature claim, because there's going to come a time probably where he says, well, no, Angel, it's still to come. What following someone like this would lead to, right? Someone who's volatile when their information is challenged and they actually want to challenge you to a fight. Someone who gets to the point where they're so angry that they want to fight you and call you out of your name and threaten to hurt you, because there's going to come a time probably where he says, well, no, Angel, it's still to come. Someone who's volatile when their information is challenged and they actually want to challenge you to a fight. Someone who gets to the point where they're so angry that they want to fight you and call you out of your name and threaten to hurt you. Well, no, Angel, it's still to come.
Now, at this point, do you think this is just purely fear that's causing this, or just mental incompetence, or perhaps a mix of the two? The only thing that would make this all the more embarrassing for this little clown right now is if that little punk James or any other of you little pretenders were involved in this. But I guarantee you, you're all gonna pay in the ways in which you will. Where are you gonna hide in God's space and time? That goes for you little clowns and whatever, quote, higher-ups you little punks dare think you place or fear ahead of actual Yahweh itself.
Well, if it's still to come, you ain't the Messiah, fam. I'll say it again. If it's still to come, you aren't the Messiah. If you're still trying to do the things that the Messiah was supposed to do, you ain't it. You can't get it because you ain't got it.
Now, not only did we address what he just said in the premise, which you will watch in full momentarily, it is important to know that no matter how close you think you are to it, a prophecy is still a declaration, a statement about the future until it is fulfilled. Then it is history. So it is asinine to ask someone what prophecies have they fulfilled. And furthermore, I also addressed this in one of the previous conversations that we had.
Prophecies, you're only able to verify them after they happen. This is why you have so many angels that hold that when the Mashiach comes, he's going to rebuild the temple. And that's how I will know the Mashiach comes. Not this foreshadowing of this, or this guy kind of looks like that. It'll be when this temple is completed.
Once more, as I addressed already.
So your premature claim invalidates your role as the Messiah. And we're going to show that, and we're going to stick here all evening long. Make no mistake, family, This argument is a gish gallop argument full of red herrings and non sequiturs. And what we're going to do is just slowly dismantle it and pick it apart. Now, when I come back and I give my premise, it's going to be clear. It's going to be clear how I'm making that argument and how I'm lying out. I'm here all night. Peace.
We are now heading into the premise round. We're going to get this thing started. It is on you, Landy. Whenever you're ready, you could begin your premise.
It is important to know that no matter how close you think you are to it, a prophecy is still a declaration, a statement about the future until it is fulfilled. Then it is history. So it is asinine to ask someone what prophecies have they fulfilled. So with that being said, when actually delving into messianic profiles, starting with the Torah through the Tanakh, you must first address the resurrection in Ezekiel chapter 37, which is very clearly a prophecy placed in metaphor for the future, as in the text it describes it as if it is happening at that very time and place, yet it was still prophecy to be fulfilled. So finally, in showing that the resurrection proposed in this person's criteria was completely flawed, is the fact that if one resurrected, where is he? Trying to say something along the lines of he's in spirit form in heaven at the right hand of the Father is complete contradiction to Jeremiah 33:17, as once more these messianic profiles, as stated by my so-called opponent prior to this, must begin in the Torah through the Tanakh. Let alone we even see Paul with bits of truth mixed within what is not true, referencing raising from the dead as the first fruits of those who have fallen asleep. Furthermore, the messianic profile that you are about to hear of, in essence, the Messiah being a first single example of the coming together of the stick of Judah and of the stick of Joseph, is further solidified by what is held as the Son of God scroll amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls, which in sequential order first speaks of the coming of the Son of God and then the rise of the people of God.
In the end,
there can be only one.
Just one, not two. So we hope and we pray and we believe that these two figures can actually be united in one person. Very important prophecy of Yechezkel, of Ezekiel, that is the prophecy of the two sticks. That one stick is the stick of Joseph and the other is the stick of David, and he puts them together and they become one stick.
So what evidence is there specifically that I would fit the messianic profile of the stick of Judah and the stick of Joseph, particularly through Ephraim, who was the younger son given the firstborn blessing, just as Jacob was with Esau? Here you are seeing epigraphic evidence to what is called the Hebraic Indian theory. And though the term Indian may set off stereotypical imagery in your head post-Columbus, this would apply to one side of my family. And though we are about to move to heavier proof that I am indeed the Mashiach, without even needing to engage subject matters such as those who believe the tribe of Ephraim is on a specific island, down to this detail, this epigraphic evidence, let alone ongoing archaeological studies on artifacts of such islands and land masses, further prove the legitimacy of me fitting this messianic profile. And on my father's side, it was shared with me that we had family in Holland, in line with, quote, Santa Claus bringing slaves on ships. Now, when getting into heavier proof, such as within our very deoxyribonucleic acid, my so-called opponent stated he wanted to see proof within genetics, particularly a haplogroup. And as you are about to hear, he just simply showed that he wanted to sound smart, but had no idea what he was talking about.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I don't disagree. You know, if you're gonna go the science route, though, then I'm gonna want to see a Y haplogroup, right? If we go science, then I want to see that Davidic Y haplogroup.
So I then very politely began to explain to him the issue with what he just asked for.
You want to see Y haplogroups, you should know that these, especially you mentioning that you studied the Human Genome Project, that the only single person that they trace back Y chromosome lineage to is, quote, Y chromosomal Adam. They don't go back to, they can go back to an area, so that still wouldn't be showing you that I'm being.
Whoa. Time out though. My point is this though. Do you understand how Y haplogroups work? Meaning, I have the same Y haplogroup as my father. So my genetic marker, my Y haplogroup is EM180. My son has that same Y haplogroup marker.
Even if tracing in that way can be traced back to the line of Judah, it still wouldn't be proving that you are the exact line of David. What I'm stating is that, one more time, going back to Samuel, that in essence, what was it that Samuel was able to show? That it was David, and specifically, let alone when we see that he has brothers there.
Though clearly he didn't get it, I was explaining to him that even when brothers such as David had brothers have the same haplogroup, where there is your apparent problem as to then looking back as to which brother you would be related to, let alone the occurrence of siblings having different haplogroups yet coming from the same parents. So now we will go back to someone who has proven to actually have a messianic scope, which ranged from the Torah through the Tanakh, and see if I do not fit what it is that they are expecting.
What we can say about the Mashiach is the Mashiach, in a certain way, to use a term from biology, from evolution theory, the Mashiach is definitely, in a certain way, a new positive mutation of mankind. It is like a quantum leap of humanity to a new place. Almost to say that a new species of mankind is appearing on the scene of reality.
And just as David and Joseph and also Ezekiel were renowned for having the Spirit of God, let's see how by the grace of God I fit being a new positive mutation of mankind, ultimately like a quantum leap of humanity that is like a new species of mankind appearing on the scene of reality. The alignment of the discovery that in fact our DNA is a fractal antenna able to pick up electromagnetic fields, including the ranges of radio frequency, overlaying with the holding that when Mashiach, which means Messiah or Christ, comes, that the radio channels will be a different scene, a different vibration. And again here, we are now in a time that we know our very DNA channels radio frequency.
Of the world. And the first thing that happens when Mashiach comes is that all of the radio channels, it's all a different scene, a different vibration.
of the holistic process of picking up those radio frequencies is the newly discovered the fourth phase of intracellular water structure, which is used for energy and also to store and transmit information, along with the fourth stage of intracellular water structure, and our DNA being a fractal antenna. The physio-electric processes within our body due to the microcrystals within our brain allow for the picking up of radio frequencies, which is showing to be the precursors, potentially, to telepathy, as you see an example of here.
We do know that Earth's magnetic fields affect everything from our mood to our ability to learn. Even stranger, research has begun to prove links between the electromagnetic field of our planet and psychic abilities. Could these crystals act like tiny antennas, connecting our brains to each other and to the entire planet? This is Dr. Michael Persinger, a neuroscientist who has argued that all phenomena, including consciousness, spiritual experiences, and even paranormal events, can be explained by physical mechanisms, and they can be verified using the scientific method. Since 1971, he has been researching electromagnetic field effects upon biological organisms. And some of his recent studies sound straight out of a sci-fi movie. Dr. Persinger has shown in the laboratory that magnetic brain stimulation can create mental states conducive to human telepathy. A recent experiment placed two people at a distance in different rooms. Each was surrounded by an identical computer-controlled magnetic field. When a light was flashed in one subject's eye, the person in the other room showed responses in their brain as if they saw the flash of light. As Dr. Persinger stated, we think that's tremendous because it may be the first macro demonstration of a quantum connection.
Now, being blessed with this gift from God, the agencies that have been looking for this activity are needing a transcranial magnetic stimulation device, and I do not need such thing to pick them up due to this God-given gift. Now, to try to simplify this, parts of the cell, as you're about to see, are studied for telecommunication purposes, such as like a telephone.
The cellular water and cytoprotein structures and membranes take on properties that are now studied in areas such as mechanobiology and metamaterials, that is, materials with unusual electromagnetic properties. Researchers at the Georgia Institute of Technology, for example, have demonstrated that hydrogel nanoparticles or gel materials such as you find in the cells can be used to form photonic crystals, which can be tuned for telecommunication through the crystalline lattice.
Even further once more.
In 2002, scientists made the exciting discovery that calcite microcrystals exist on the pineal gland, and that these crystals can interact with electromagnetic fields.
These crystals have piezoelectric properties with excitability in the frequency range of mobile telecommunications. They theorize that the interactions of these crystals with global system for mobile telecommunication waves could constitute a new mechanism of transduction of the pineal membrane. What this means in layman's terms is that our pineal gland is a cell phone.
Now, there has been a neuroscientist by the name of Christopher Thompson, which has made 2 videos now on this very subject of telepathy. Those videos originally came from me sending over a scientific paper further demonstrating telepathy. And as you're about to see here, After making 2 videos based off of what I sent over originally, our neuroscientist goes from telling me he will reply soonish to just simply running, adding his degrees to my collection. So though my so-called opponent is no neuroscientist, I still gave him the chance to prove me incorrect by giving him the information of one of these agents, which he took the information of and then got scared. Instead of producing the person to prove me a liar, came back and tried to say I may be making this person up. Clearly that's not the case, and one of these angels' brother is police.
Alright, shout out to Landy, the Christ. We're gonna keep this thing rocking and rolling. We're gonna now pass the rock over to Anonymous. Let me bring Anonymous back up. Bring his presentation back up. Okay, let me take this down and bring the presentation back up. Alright, A9, it is on you. You got 15 to do your thing whenever you're ready. You there, A9?
Yeah. Y'all can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can see me now?
Yeah, we see you. Yeah, this nigga's done.
Y'all got me out of bed for this. Okay. Hey, hold on. Let me get to my joint. Hold on, man. Only thing I'm disappointed in is I wasn't able to do what I'm gonna tell y'all what I was mad at later. Oh my goodness. Hey, shout out to my wives that's listening, man. I love y'all. You know what I'm saying? We finna cook though. Barbecue chicken. Let's go. I could run, right? And I got 15 minutes.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, A9.
All right, 15 minutes starting now. All right, let's go. To my premise. Once again, disclaimer, I'm not rebuttaling. I am actually presenting a premise, but because he is the subject of the premise, it's going to sound a little rebuttally at first. Landy, I need to know where your proof is, brother. Right? Before we examine the legitimacy of Landy's messianic claims, we must first establish a consistent, historical, grounded, and theologically sound messianic profile. Right? This is not a rebuttal. This is just setting the framework. Just like in law, we must define the standard before weighing any case. And by all traditional Jewish, Christian, or any other historical standards, Landy's claim collapses before it even jumps off the porch, family. Now, remember, I told you about my points. So the first thing I'm going to do for you is paint his profile. And notice, I already knew what he's going to do because watch, it's in my presentation, right? So what we're going to do is first paint the profile, then we're going to measure it up, and then I'm going to show you why you need to run from people like this. All right. Number one, he has no real biblical support. If you listen, there was no real biblical support. The debate is he the biblical Messiah? Number two, he appeals to authority with Rabbi Ginsburg. 3, he talked about genetic load, but he didn't really explain it.
Further proving that this kid is really hoping that everyone is as stupid as he is. You'll notice that I didn't mention genetic load at all in that opening nor the premise. However, I did address it in one of the previous conversations that we had, further proving that the diet outlined in Genesis 1:29 and upheld by the Ebion, the Ebionites, directly affect genetic expression, the genetic code, and is obviously a direct answer to combat genetic load. God intertwining not only this being scientifically proven, as you're about to hear more of in a moment, but of course that I myself have experienced this to share it. The effect and the rejuvenation that can result in this diet.
What are the things in particularly that were supposed to happen when the actual Christ comes? Things are supposed to better for us, correct?
Yeah, definitely.
Like for example, there's something called genetic load that you may have seen, that it's literally scientifically proven that the human genome has been degrading. And when you look into this, it's been done at a time frame that literally fits a literal atom via just, again, circa 6,000 years ago now. I'm not saying the Earth itself is 6,000 years old, but us, Adam, humankind here, is 6,000 years old. And excuse me, not to get off in a whole other thing because you're not combating that. What my point is that if this genetic load, if this mutation were hundreds of thousands of years old, we wouldn't be here as a species. So along with these things getting better, it's not just reconstructing our genetic code, which, for example, there's an angel by the name of Elizabeth Blackburn, and she literally has proven that the diet, which you mentioned that you saw some on earlier, that diet was literally proven to affect our genetic code directly. It's no secret that food directly affects our genetic expressions. And she literally has proven that such a diet changed 500 genes in just 3 months, literally turning off genes that cause chronic disease and turning on those to prevent them. So of course, along with this coming, there is, for those that are rising along, because of course you have those skeptics that know better out there, and that is what it is. But of course, along with this coming is a betterment, literally. This is what was, in essence, written of in Micah when it states that they're awaiting one whose origins are of old and ancient ways. And for example, when you look into Jubilees, you will see that the first sacrifice was plant-based, done by Adam. And also, there's a sect you may have heard of called the Ebionites. They reject animal sacrifices and also kept the diet that I'm speaking of. So along with this coming is again the return of those old and ancient ways. It's reminiscent of what's written in Zephaniah, that there will be a return of a pure language. But to highlight all the more that, just as I mentioned, that gematria in itself literally is based off of the base 10 decimal system. Yep. Literally. Yeah. And not only that, but there's a scientist which just proved that our very genetic code is also in sync with that very base 10 decimal system, which brings up all the more. In fact, again, someone having to confront creation, as the Hebrew script is a triliteral root structure, and our genetic code sends the messages of the nucleotides in threes. 3 nucleotides make up a codon. So here we see a parallel between the Hebrew script being triliteral and our genetic code sending its messages in threes. And just like the Hebrew script, it has a mathematical structure based off of that decimal system that you just mentioned. Here there's a scientist that just proved our very DNA is in sync with that very same decimal system.
By any stretch of the imagination, you've proven a very adequate and great knowledge of a lot of great teaching and deep and critical understanding about how humans should respond, right? But I'll just give you one thing, for instance. Just because you understand diets and how it affects the body, Dr. Sebi understood that, right? Just because you understand certain things, there are several people who have already learned these things and pre-taught these things. And there are people who have a multiple combination of all of these things.
Now here we see just how completely asinine this kid truly is, as the person he referred to, Dr. Sebi, learned of this diet from someone who knew it prior to himself. As once more, this diet, along with other knowledge, has been passed down since Adam and Eve, as I go into in other sharings.
And so come that evening, it's gonna get real tough. And I just say these things not to brag or boast. I think your spirit is so dope. I don't want you to come in surprised.
Trust me, again, this is the same line that slayed Goliath. Don't you worry about that. But it's the truth. But I very much appreciate what you're stating. But there's a few things that I just want to make sure are clear. For example, what may have been, speaking of the Ebionites in that time frame of example for 2,000 years ago, when you hear about different stories of what most people think of when they hear of one of the line of David, and particularly 2,000 years ago, you hear about angels elevating. This is why they followed him. You heard about them getting stronger, not just mentally, but different. You hear about things that maybe the Romans may have exaggerated, such as when it comes to healing the sick.
And just as earlier texts and Jubilees make very clear that Noah was teaching to his sons what his fathers before him taught him, just as Enoch taught his sons, and just as was before him. And Noah was taught medicinal plant medicines, and of course he passed that knowledge down, and we see a trait within what is renowned as the Essenes, the actual Hebrews which preserved and protected the Dead Sea Scrolls, known to be healers devoted to curing the body as well as the soul. So it should not be any surprise that the family of those of my line circa 2,000 years ago kept the same diet and practices, let alone were experienced within the same exact subject matters. And just like today, with their own God-given gifts, individually, of course. So in knowing that teachings such as when it comes to healing were passed down through the line since Adam and Eve, through the line that became known as Hebrews and Israelites. As you siphon through New Testament texts, deciphering what is actually true from what is not true, as time reveals all. But we can see personality traits and characteristics of the Ebionites, of the Essenes, and what is known as the book of John, chapter 4, as with this scope set in truth, it clarifies all the more. If this took place, it wasn't necessarily anything at all to do with any woo, but very groundedly, there was a kind of fever diagnosed and addressed and then treated. And of course it is God that is in complete control of both time and space. It is no stretch of the imagination from reality for someone to notice what many would like to call a coincidence when something happens at a particular time and then the person notes the outcome aligning with the time the day before. Again, as God leaves its signatures in all the ways in which it does. Though as you would with any artifact or treasure, of course, deciphering what is real from what is not is to be done with the utmost care, as of course the war over the truth is very evident, not just throughout time, but of course in the place and time in which we are discussing now, as the Ebionites or the Ebion, actual Hebrews, were renowned to have a version of what are renowned as the Gospels that were distinct from what are renowned to be Pauline type doctrine. And as by the grace of God this point is driven home all the more, so to speak, and then some, we see here that what is renowned as the Messianic Apocalypse scroll, which describes the expected work of a Messiah, reads not just of healing and curing, but bringing it back full circle to Ezekiel chapter 37, a resurrection.
Of course, in this time frame, our genetics work in 2,000 years ago, our genetics work the same as they did now. And of course, angels found themselves bettering themselves, who actually followed whom people are who referred to as Jesus, literally. So when someone says that, hey, just because others are able to attain these levels, that doesn't discredit it. This is what it means when angels say things such as, hey, you'll be able to do works that are better than me eventually, because you will also be able to build upon the foundations that we are laying right now.
Excellent. I love it all, brother. I love it all. I'm trying to make sure I just know exactly where you're coming from.
4, there's this dietary rejuvenation thing. Then he says he has no need for Davidic lineage. You heard him say that.
Not only did this compulsive liar just completely, of course, lie again, but I already brought up Jeremiah 33 verse 17 in the premise when it came to completely dismantling his supposed criteria, trying to say something along the lines of he's in spirit form in heaven at the right hand of the Father is complete contradiction to Jeremiah 33:17, as once more these messianic profiles, as stated by my so-called opponent prior to this, must begin in the Torah through the Tanakh. And on top of that, our brain-fogged little carcass crackhead must have forgot the very title to the debate that I allowed him to name himself, which is Landy the Christ, meaning the Mashiach, the promised biblical Davidic Messiah. And now foolishly, he brings up the fact that I did indeed bring up Jeremiah 33:17 in the previous conversation that we had. And very delusionally, he states that I did a 2-hour video on him when all I did was repost the conversation without any commentary or even correcting him in that moment whatsoever. So here we will walk through addressing that.
And then he talks about messianic action still to come because he opened that up. Now, the reason I'm referencing these things is this gentleman did a whole video on me like everybody else did. He did 2 hours of talking about me.
Now, as I just said, I reposted the conversation that we had, but being as he just completely lied and tried to state I made a video about him going further and just stating, like, quote, everybody else did, as we've seen here alone, the track record of how easily lying comes to these clowns. Something tells me, quote, everybody else only exists in this kid's head, behind that little mask of his.
Well, he got the recording from when we actually had our first conversation, right? So this is my first piece of evidence. He has no biblical support. Throughout this entire video, when you watch, specifically around the 17:51 second mark, Landy states that Jeremiah 33:17 proves that he's the Messiah, but his only argument is that he's king right now.
Now, I warned this little puppy that he should actually watch these videos prior to any engaging with me on any level at all, so that he would not embarrass himself like he is doing right now. So here we'll go ahead and review the part of the conversation he just referenced.
Mentioned the first coming, that there was always a line of Christ. Remember, since David, then Solomon, then Rehoboam was the line of Christ. Even though Solomon had brothers, even though Rehoboam had brothers, they were still the specific line of Christ, even coming from David. Still, his brothers. So what I'm stating specifically is, like, for example, Jeremiah 33:17. This might be a good contention for debate for you, because I just got finished. I'm about to do a review on it. They don't know how badly they've been crushed, but some angels that are Torah only is what they call themselves, and basically they challenge those to try to show basically what was a Romanized Caesar Borgia in the Old Testament. And when they heard Jeremiah 33:17, that there will always be a man from the house of David to sit on the throne of Israel, what you may want to try to pick this up or not, because I've crushed them on it, is they started to ask me, "Oh, are you king right now? Do you rule right now?" And I said, "Yes, I am king right now."
That statement is going to be further clarified here in a moment.
And when I said I am king right now, they said, "Oh, that's where you fudged up, because it says there will always be a man of the house from the house of David to sit on the throne of Israel." Now, I'm the one who pointed out it says to sit on the throne of Israel while we were speaking. But then they tried to contend that if it says to sit, you're not the king right now, meaning, of course, anointings and things of this nature. However, when you keep reading, the next line states, "And there will never lack a man from the Levitical priests to make sacrifice." Now, hold on now. Let's examine that for a moment. How do you become a Levitical priest? Here, there's only two ways anyone's going to come up with. One is to be born of the Zadokite line, be born of Levi. And two, of course, not only to have already that check mark, but to then be anointed. So then the question comes, of course, are these angels going to be anointing themselves? Of course not. So yes, indeed, when we go back, is it that I have to anoint myself, or do I fulfill these same exact check marks that those Levitical priests have to? Which is indeed a fact. They're not going to anoint themselves. They can't. And indeed, of course, they still have to be of that line of Levi.
So just as I stated, here we are going to clarify all the more how it is that I can say that I am king right now, in complete clarity, completely grounded. So here we're going to start a little earlier within the conversation that is the subject right now, and though it should become completely evident to you, I will stop it at the part in which I make my point, and then we will continue on.
Listen, we don't have to play any games. That would be like asking, is David king right before anyone anointed him or anything like that. If you would like to play games such as that, then you're welcome to do so.
No, he wasn't a king before anybody anointed him.
And
now here you just heard that this Torah logic character stated that he wasn't a king before anyone anointed him. So that being said, going off of that quote logic, then he should have been king once he was anointed. So since we're going strictly off of that, let's take a look at what happened once King David of my line, by the grace of God, was anointed the first time. Now, the first time out of the 3 times King David was anointed is held in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 13. Now let's begin at the very beginning of this chapter. And it states, Yahweh said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him from being king over Yisrael?" Continue on. Fill your horn with oil and go. I will send you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided a king for myself among his sons. This is clearly prior to the anointing, and furthermore, Saul was still technically a king after the initial anointing, and thus, of course, the history that takes place thereafter. So to this Torah logic character, his entire camp, which I'm sure will be wanting to defend him, to help him, and any other whom questions anything with regards to what I am stating, first address this: since King David needed to wait to be anointed to be king, why is it that Saul was still technically a king after that anointing? This is why at the beginning of this conversation I stated, I am the king by the grace of God. As you see here in the beginning of the chapter, it is God that provided the king.
Hold on.
Go ahead, Tor.
You're going to be the king?
I am the king by the grace of God.
So here we see clearly, even prior to the anointing by Samuel, it is stated that Yahweh said to Samuel, "For I have provided a king for myself." And when it comes to God speaking, to God saying anything, it must be analyzed on a case-by-case basis, such as, for example, after God made the sea creatures and the winged animals, such as the insects that fly, after God made them, it states that it said, "Be fruitful and multiply." Obviously, it did not have to begin speaking to the sea creatures or winged insects, but this represented, of course, what was programmed within them. And without getting too far off subject in the moment, here is one more example. Be poetically placed is shown to be true via scientific proof, as it continues to read, "And God said, let there be light, and there was light." And as further modern day revelation proves that the Bible is as precise as it has been perceived as poetic, as stating "and God said" could be perceived as poetic, and time proves that it is scientifically precise, as sound is vibrating frequency. So the poetic portrayal of "God said, let there be light" is scientifically accurate, as energy such as light is a manifestation of frequency. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And as a hydrogen atom has the appropriate interaction with an electron, this emits light. And by the grace of God, we know what colors are emitted from a hydrogen atom, and grounding all the more the realization that God created the universe using 22 letters is the fact that the word for letter in Hebrew is also the root word for frequencies. And it has been proven that the gematria for the very colors emitted from a hydrogen atom are directly reflective of its wave frequencies. And further demonstrating biblical accuracy when it comes to frequency is in Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 11, stating not to wear wool interwoven or mixed with linen, and both linen and wool have a frequency of at least 5,000, yet when interwoven, when mixed together, they cancel each other out to zero. Further proof of this nature, of the authenticity, the legitimacy of the biblical records, are found throughout my sharings. Now, with regards to the subject at hand, I have proven that it is God that chooses its king with regards to Jeremiah 33 verse 17, and the proof of such you saw within the premise that it is indeed myself, by the grace of Yahweh. And here we'll see God's perfect order within the orchestration that it conducted creation, within a signature since Adam and Eve to the reigns of David and Solomon. And then we will return to this conversation. The significance of the descendants of David's grandmother being 14 generations from Abraham at the time of David. Now the law of Deuteronomy 23 verse 3 we will see was clearly being observed in Judah. And living within the laws, Boaz made sure that there were elders, which of course knew the law, which witnessed all. And it is with great reason that the book of Ruth concludes with the genealogy of David, counting from Perez, as David is the 10th generation since Yahudah, Judah, and the congregation of the Lord, the assembly of the Lord, was by tribe. This is why Ruth ends counting the generations, the congregation, the assembly of the Lord, organized by tribe. Here was Judah. David was the 10th generation thereof. We also see a deep reflection in the fact that the women said to Naomi, your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons. And David being anointed after 7 sons have already passed. A sweet signature of the divine providence, the hand of God. And now we will go deeper into the significance of David being the 14th generation since Abraham, and also authenticating the sharing of the decree that the Lord has said to my line, "You are my son, today I have begotten thee." We are about to see further proof of God's awesome order and orchestration throughout what we may perceive in the moment as chaotic, as random. Now once more, there are 14 generations from Abraham to David. And not only is this number the gematria, the mathematical equivalent of the name David, further revelation of the absolute supremacy of God itself, composing and conducting order where we may perceive chaos, is the fact that there are 14 generations from Abraham to David, and then 14 generations from David to the exile in Babylon. When we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest copies of the Bible in the world, with some scholars dating them back to the 5th century BC, we will not only find roots to the answers of some of the questions that we have today, but we will actually see copies of, for example, Noah speaking to his sons in the first person, as of course fragments of the book of Jubilees is a part of the very Dead Sea Scrolls. Here we see the origins of a ceremonial custom that should a woman give birth to a son, after a total of 40 days, 7 and then 33, she will then be purified. And if she has a daughter, it will be twice 7, 14 days, and then also double the 33 days, 66. Twice that for a boy, for a total of 80. And then when we look at the book of Jubilees that was preserved and protected by the Hebrews in Qumran as one of the Dead Sea Scrolls, we see further depths as to what it means that Israel is my son, even my firstborn, as these ceremonies, these laws and statutes, this history has been recorded, preserved, and protected since Adam and Eve. And as we see here, this ceremony is in commemoration of the first 2, Adam and Eve, and a reminder that we all come from the first 2. Once more, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And as aligns with twice 7, the 14th verse of this chapter states that this is a law for Yisrael to keep for all days, as Moses and the Israelites were preserving what was since Adam and Eve. 7 days plus 33 for a total of 40. And by the grace of God, upon reflection, we see a miraculous alignment that the reign of David was 7 years in Judah and then 33 years all of Israel for a total of 40. And even deeper still, just as a part of the completion of that commemoration when it came to the female was the number 80 altogether when it comes to the commemoration of the beginning of mankind. And by the grace of God, the combined reigns of both David and Solomon are 40 years each for a total of 80. And as we are able to behold that David reigned for 7 years in Judah, directly overlaying with the 7 days for the birth of a male as held in Jubilees and Leviticus. 6 months overlaying, of course, with representing creation done on the 6th day. And also then 33 years ruling all of Israel, directly aligned with the completion of the 40 days outlined in Jubilees and Leviticus. And a part of the completion of that commemoration, the 80 days for the birth of a daughter, we see the combined reigns of both David and Solomon equal 80. This alignment of the reigns of David and Solomon, along with the commemoration of the creation of Adam, completely bringing all the more understanding to Israel is my son, even my firstborn, let alone the sharing of the decree in Psalms. You are my son. Today I have begotten thee. And brings all the more credence to Adam in acronym form, serving as a calendar or a clock, since Adam to David to Mashiach, Messiah, Christ, which by the grace of God is myself. And just as the studying of our chronological history has been, and just as the studying of our chronological history has been the subject of focus of many great angels, those studies have extended to gematria, the ingenious infusion of letters and numbers, which, as we are made in the image of God, we have used to reflect the order and orchestration that God itself has conducted throughout the universe. As the famous saying in Psalms 23, "For thou art with me," shows to be a poetically placed sweet symphony, as "For thou art with me" in orchestration is flanked with 26 words on both sides, just as we have seen here through its orchestration of order. "For thou art with me" is revealed all the more. Now, with that being all the more clarified, here we will return to the conversation. And for those of you who go back to watch the full video of the clips you just saw, there is a part in which I call the person in which I was speaking to in the moment, in essence, a Roman agent. And shortly after they were obliterated by me, they literally dropped their masks and now they just try to prove atheism.
Listen, if you're a Roman agent, at the end of the day, little Torah, and you come here to poke holes at what might be true, I'm talking to you.
I'm asking you to prove your claims.
I told you it's on my page. So if you really took it seriously, you would go through it and see if there's something you could actually dissect.
But has no consistent viewpoint, has no way of doing this, and I'm just using this to start to paint a profile, right? His biblical explanation of why he is the Messiah has no biblical support. Next, Rabbi Ginsburg. Now, I don't want to embarrass Gandalf the Grey here. Right?
Now we're just going to stop here for one moment and remember that here, this quote-unquote man, whom is hoping whoever it is that he is attracted to or speaking to never actually sees my face, is in his 40s wearing a mask. Let alone the fact that he would completely pee himself in person.
Right? But he's not an authority. Rabbi Ginsburg is not an authority. And what he does is take a massive appeal to authority.
I don't have any issue with any of that. I don't even have an issue with you standing on oral history or oral tradition, right? I don't have any issue with any of that. I don't even have an issue with you standing on oral history or oral tradition.
Lean on different things that this guy says and then paints a picture of him being the Messiah and then talk to you slow because he hopes he can hypnotize you. That's all this is, right? Throughout the video, but specifically around beginning the 10-second mark, like off rip, he starts quoting Rabbi Ginsburg. He says that the rabbi has laid various criteria for being the Messiah, but never says that, look, here's the greatest part, never says that the rabbi has crowned him the Messiah.
They are right now the head of what they are doing, literally, just like one can say that Samuel was. So in particularly, did Yitzhak say that I'm this or that? I've never had a conversation yet with Yitzhak. I stated from the beginning of our conversation that what he said he is looking for, I do fit the description of. And the thing is, in our debate, you will also have to prove that I don't.
Right. So when we understand this, his profile or his explanation of this is based upon a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes. Was there anything in particular with just so to have your, objective opinion when you saw that? And I know that you may have been doing other things at the same, or whatever the case may be. When you saw that, was there anything there that you felt didn't align, was not concise, was not clear?
Not at all. I'm actually familiar. I was familiar with it before the video, or that, what you shared. So my contention is not on the radio transmitting frequencies or even the ability of DNA, the things that are embedded in the genetic code, the genome, or the pineal gland, right?
Particularly in Christ.
No, not even that. I don't have any. I don't have any technically any argument against it.
Particularly in Christ.
No, not even that. I don't have any. I don't have any technically any argument against it.
Right. So when we understand this, his profile or his explanation of this is based upon a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Particularly in Christ.
No, not even that. I don't have any. I don't have any technically any argument against it.
Next, he talked about genetic load. 9 minutes and 30 seconds, 39 seconds in the video, he says that the genetic load is proof that he's the Messiah, meaning that the reason that our genetics are starting to get better, according to him, is simply because he's the Messiah. No, he ain't. If anybody getting better, it's because they eating better.
Now, obviously, you see once more the pathological liar that this child is. And as again, we already went through this, but hilariously enough, just after stating that in essence, what I was saying is just because I'm here, everyone's genome is bettering, let alone after the fact that we already went through the diet, of course, held since Adam and Eve. But furthermore, then he goes on to state right now that I get into speaking about the diet.
But anyway, then he said dietary rejuvenation, right? He said one of the main reasons that he qualified himself as a Messiah was because he started to eat a certain biblical diet.
Now, once more at this point, do you think he's just mentally inept? Or perhaps this is fear? Or maybe some mix of the two? So if there's anyone out there that thinks that they would do better than this child, who of course I'm making look like a complete idiot, it's one thing to look at something from the outside, and it's another thing when it's you. So of course, come forward if you think you would do better than this kid who, as I agree, is absolutely no match for me whatsoever. But this will be all by the grace of God, who oppose this.
Notice he didn't bring up none of that in his premise, right? Because it's nonsense. But I have to address it because this was all I had to go on. Notice I sent him a premise. He didn't send me one. So I had to go off of it at this point. He says he has no need to prove a Davidic lineage.
There's no need to delve into just how idiotic this is at this point, but not only will you not find me quoted as stating that anywhere, but I did make quite clear that we will see upon reflection that God itself makes this clear. Furthermore, our little genius forgot that I stated that a 5-minute opening and a 15-minute premise, of course, was not sufficient to place all of the information which I have in order to prove this reality. Now more of this kid embarrassing himself as any other will.
I'm going to prove that in the rest of this conversation, the way that you determine who the Messiah is to deal with the Davidic lineage. Finally, or next, he says he has still more things to do. It's still some things to come.
This coward must have forgot that he himself was trying to leverage that there are still prophecies unfulfilled, such as the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem.
And then lastly, he considers himself to be self-appointed.
Not only, of course, have I never said that I consider myself self-appointed, but as I've demonstrated, it is God which provided the king.
So when we look at Landy's profile, he has various misquoted biblical scriptures.
Of course, only driven by envy within his delusion, he doesn't have any of these made-up moments of supposedly misquoting scriptures to present, as here we hear him pouring out his unsubstantiated false claims sprung from his hope.
Rabbi Ginsburg claimed that how the Messiah would come, and genetic load, dietary rejuvenation, and a self-appointed or self-fulfilling prophecy. Now let's cook. Landy's false claims. The Messianic Christian profile. Let's look at this first. So in the Messianic Christian profile, we have a few major themes. Born of a virgin, coming from the line of David.
Do you think once more that this mentally inept, delusional child actually gets the contradiction and what he's saying?
Born of a virgin, coming from the line of David.
Or do you think he's just a liar?
Born of a virgin, coming from the line of David.
Even entertaining this fairy tale for even a second, born of a virgin, in the way in which he means it, refers to being born of solely a woman, not the union of a woman being with a man, which God has very clearly shown has been its blueprint since Adam and Eve. And even artificially, you would still need the seed of a man along with the egg of a woman.
Born of a virgin, coming from the line of David.
So once more, the contradiction is very clear that you cannot be both born of a woman and only a woman without any vital parts from a man, which of course is just purely science fiction, and also be of the line, the seed of David.
You're going to see this a lot. Torah observant, suffers and resurrects, and then a global impact on the Jews and the Gentiles, right? This is just what the Bible says. So if we go start looking at this, the first one is the virgin birth, right? Behold, a virgin shall be with child and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which being interpreted as God with us. He could have easily just went into this and said, no, this is untrue, and told us why.
And here we see further case of brain fog and memory lapse when it comes to this clown's own words.
This is why you see the lineage in Matthew, and that's why many of us argue that there is no virgin birth and definitely no immaculate conception. Instead, Matthew the daddy, Matthew the pappy, right? Because now you come through the proper lineage, which is proper Hebraic culture.
And speaking of misquoted scriptures and misinterpretations, where does it say that Hebraic culture is that Matthew is the daddy of any of the line of David?
So when we look at Landy's profile, he has various misquoted biblical scriptures, or at least told us how you were born, where you were born, anything like that, that made you a specific person to be the Messiah, but you didn't, right?
Who continues to fit this description? Like if we have a handful of people who claim that they're the Messiah, you know, who fits this? Who fits that? Who fits this as we continue to identify what? Like with me, I'm going to be honest with you. It goes down to the detail that my father's name is even Joseph here today. And if I just said that by itself, like if I just walked around and said, hey, I'm the Messiah because my father's name is Joseph, I'm the son of Joseph, the line of David, literally. And this brings together how these angels state that in Ezekiel, it states that two sticks will come together, the house of David, the house of Joseph. And people were like, how the heck is that? And if I ran around stating this little shred of like evidence all by itself, I would get, of course, laughed out of the room. You know how many people are a son of Joseph now today, Landy? You know how many people have fathers named Joseph? But again, things such as, for example, if you look into, there's angels that I was looking to debate when it comes to Deuteronomy. And usually, excuse me, when I mention Deuteronomy, I'm talking about the slave ship specifically. I'm talking about the slave ships, and specifically that it states you'll go to bondage again on ships. And there are many that try to, discredit that, hey, well, who is the king that it says that it says will go along with you, which it actually states in Zephaniah chapter 3, ultimately that is the Lord God itself that's king. But the reason why I bring that up, is to continue fitting these descriptions, such as I learned from my grandmother that my great-grandparents were in Holland, and specifically. And then when I looked into it a little further, you will see that Holland has a tradition that takes place by this calendar's count just around November, where, quote, St. Nicholas or, quote, Santa Claus is literally bringing slaves over on ships to Holland. Literally. So when we keep going down the line and checking off who fits this, who fits this, who fits this, I continue to check out. And I'm not just saying that to toot my own horn or anything like that. And that's why, excuse me, when you mention wine specifically, why I bring up, you know, the videos in particular where I've lined this up, because just trying to like sporadically, oh, this or this or that, especially when not knowing where the other person may be at, of course, can add to or can lead to disconnect. Because there are some people, for example, that they're under the impression currently that, for example, Moses didn't make up Genesis, but originated writing it. And when you truly look into the history, this is why Aaron had to approach Pharaoh with Moses, as it states again, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And it was the Aaron, ultimately, those such as him, which were actually a part of keeping the history that was since Adam. This is why, again, when you look into Jubilees, it states Moses went up to the mountain, and then they started talking about, hey, these are the divisions of when you look into Jubilees, these are the divisions of the years, literally going into what our history actually has been.
Next, when we deal with the Davidic lineage, notice everywhere I'm going to take you, the Davidic lineage is essential. He's born of a virgin. Notice everywhere I'm going to take you, the Davidic lineage is essential. He's born of a virgin, right? And when the days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels. He's born of a virgin, and I will establish his kingdom being David's kingdom. And he shall buy a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I'm going to address how this hurts his argument later, right? I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men. And I'm going to skip down to verse 16. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever. Before thee, thy throne shall be established forever. This is literally saying that we need to have a Davidic Messiah on the throne whose lineage is established. This is a part of the messianic profile. Next, Torah observance. He clearly does not understand this, right? So Isaiah 42, 1 and 4, and I'll just read verse 4. He shall not fail nor be discouraged till he have set judgment in the earth, and the isles shall wait for his law. This is what the Messiah is supposed to be doing. He's supposed to be achieving something called teshuvah, where he starts to get people back in the right mindset, start to get people back in a position of being peaceful and loving and starting to grow together.
Literally. So when someone says that, hey, just because others are able to attain these levels, that doesn't discredit it. This is what it means when angels say things such as, hey, you'll be able to do works that are better than me eventually, because you will also be able to build upon the foundations that we are laying right now.
Excellent. I love it all, brother. I love it all.
Get people back in the right mindset, start to get people back in a position of being peaceful and loving and starting to grow together.
Excellent. I love it all, brother. I love it all.
Get people back in the right mindset, start to get people back in a position of being peaceful and loving.
Excellent. I love it all, brother. I love it all.
And starting to grow together. The suffering resurrection, right? And this is just the messianic or the Christian perspective, right? Yet it pleased the Lord, this is Isaiah 53, I'm going to just read verse 10. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him, he hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. Here's the issue. I'm not here to argue whether or not you agree with this. We're just talking about the messianic profile, right? It's going to be his job to tell us why this is wrong. Let's keep it moving. Right? And he shall travail his soul, and shall be satisfied by his knowledge. Shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. This is just biblical talk for he's going to teach people how to keep the Torah. This goes back to Torah observance, right? Next, a global impact. Whoever the Messiah is going to have a global impact. And they're not going to be arguing with me about being the Messiah because they're going to be too busy taking care of people, right? He said, it's a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that they may as be a salvation unto the end of the earth. Whoever this messianic figure is, it's their job to be a light to the end of the earth. right? So now when we look at this, you can see the devil right there. Somebody looks like the devil that the Bible speaks of.
I'm not even one of these Hebrew Israelite Christians. These Hebrew Christianites who still hold on to a lot of this hocus pocus.
Right? So now when we look at this, you can see the devil right there. Somebody looks like the devil that the Bible speaks of.
I'm not even one of these Hebrew Israelite Christians. These Hebrew Christianites who still hold on to a lot of this hocus pocus.
Because he clearly goes against the messianic profile. And when you compare it next to him, we see what it looks like. Let's keep it moving. Argument number 3. All right. His false claims versus Orthodox and Hasidic Judaism. Now, this is very key because Rabbi Ginsburg is his appeal to authority. But what we're going to see is even during an Orthodox Judaic messianic profile, you have Torah observance, a lineage from David, a builder of the third temple, a gatherer of the exiles, establish global peace and a recognition by the world. This is simple, family. I can't believe I had to get up for this, right? I was thinking I was really going to have a fight. Torah observance. So now, this is coming from the Mishnah, right? So we're going to deal with the Mishnah Torah Law, Kings and Wars, chapter 11. This is Rabbi Rambam. Now notice, I'm giving you sources, right? Then in his days, the observance of all the statutes will return to their previous state, and we will offer sacrifices, observe the sabbatical and jubilee years according to all their particulars and described by the Torah. So whoever this messianic figure is, they're not going to be arguing about whether or not they're the Messiah. They're going to be teaching you how to keep the law.
States that they're awaiting one whose origins are of old and ancient ways. For example, when you look into jubilees, you will see that the first sacrifice was plant-based, done by Adam. And also there's a sect you may have heard of called the Ebionites. They reject animal sacrifices and also kept the diet that I'm speaking of. So along with this coming is again the return of those old and ancient ways. It's reminiscent of what's written in Zephaniah, that there will be a return of a pure language, but to highlight all the more.
Right? That's the prophetic role. The lineage of David. I told you don't keep saying it in this same part. Now understand, I'm not just cherry picking. This entire chapter is specifically talking about the law of kings, the law of the Messiah, right? So same chapter, verse 1. Reference to Mashiach is also made in the portion of Balaam, who prophesies about 2 anointed kings. The first anointed, David, who saves Israel from her oppressors, and the final anointed king who will arise from his descendants and save Israel by the end of days. It's easy, right? The lineage of David. And then they reference the book of Numbers. I'm really not going to go into it because I'm starting to get low on time. But what we see there is they reference the book of Numbers to prove their case on Shabbat, right? Now, the builder of the third temple, according to the same chapter, that whoever this messianic figure is, their job is going to be to build the third temple and gather the dispersed of Israel. That's the role of the Messiah, according to the Hasidic Jew, according to Rabbi Ginsburg, right? Gather the exiles. I just talked about this, right? This is the same chapter, 11, verse 4. And he gathers the dispersed of Israel. He is definitely the Mashiach. Now, I want you to understand this part. If he succeeds in the above and builds the temple in his place, then he's the Mashiach. If he doesn't, then he's not. That's going to come into play towards the end.
Messianic prophecies, you're only able to verify them after they happen. This is why you have so many angels that hold that when the Mashiach comes, he's going to rebuild the temple. And that's how I will know the Mashiach comes. Not this foreshadowing of this, or this guy kind of looks like that. It'll be when this temple is completed.
All right. Now, this last part, establish global peace. The job of the Messiah is to establish global peace. It is to bring the nations into understanding, not subjection, right? And then he'll be recognized by the world. It's that simple. This is the Orthodox Judaism messianic profile. It doesn't matter if you look at it from a spiritual point, a physical point. This is how it should be laid out. Notice we couldn't get that from him. So you line that up, you line it up with his, and we see who doesn't pass the smell test.
Like after hearing it, I'm very comfortable with everything. I think you have a good command of your argument. I'm excited for the challenge. I do agree. You are as good as advertised, right? You do have a way that you go about proving it. And so, I'm just crazy enough to go ahead and put it to the test. I do agree. You are as good as advertised, right? You do have a way that you go about proving it. And so, I'm just crazy enough to go ahead and put it to the test.
Now, let's go ahead and get to the end of this, family. Historical patterns of false messiahs. Yeah, that's right. David Koresh, Jim Jones. These are the same type of people that he's lining himself up with, because he won't give you proof, but he has delusions of grandeur, right? So if we think about it, he's suffering from this traumatic syndrome that he has. David Koresh had a delusion of grandeur, trauma-based, spiritual narcissism, controlled revelation, right? And increased volatility under pressure to the point where he got into a whole shootout with the ATF and the FBI. Jim Jones, messianic paranoia, trauma from childhood, delusional spiritual authority, right? Crisis-based control, and then a final break where he had everybody commit suicide. Why is this important? Because I do believe that this brother is suffering from traumatic messiah syndrome. Because the last time we talked, he threatened to fight me, called me a little B.
Now, in case anybody thought that I was just exaggerating to make it sound better when I said the only thing outside of his name that I called him was a B word, verbatim, here you have proof from him himself that that's all that I called him. Who loses control of themselves and uses the term B word or little b verbatim?
Called me a little B, talked about my women, talked about my wives, the entire thing, right?
And once more, when it came to any fighting or talking about any women whatsoever, which it wouldn't surprise me if he's just completely lying about here, literally, he began to shout from far away like a B word, and I began to bring up that if he wanted to, then he could come in person and we could go to a boxing gym. Otherwise, I brought up, of course, that his fiance, which is what he stated in the moment, was hearing him scream like a B word without even any intentions of any actually coming in person, let alone anything beyond that whatsoever, and that obviously she would see the kind of coward that she was getting involved with.
He has a history of psychological trauma from boxing.
Now, anyone who's ever seen me fight, by the grace of God, not that it takes away from my ability to actually take as great as I can give, as I actually fought in sanctioned Olympic-style boxing, literally from heavyweight down to light welterweight, as I've stated before, on both what people consider national and international levels. But as I showed my God-given face earlier, my God-given reflection, I've seldom been touched, as anybody whom has actually seen me fight, whether inside, mid-range, or outside, can all attest to. However, specific to the statements that you just heard from this child, let's see who has acknowledged that they have a history of mental health problems.
Let you know, I was in the military. I used to fight as well. I heard you was a boxer. I did like some cage fighting for a while. And I know what it does to your body, especially gaining, losing weight at that clip. And then once you stop, right, I'm very familiar with the different diets. I had to go through that as well. I also had to go through the issue of using the Torah to get my mind back in control, right? Get my mind back in control, right? Get my mind back in control, right? After being at war so many times.
Now, on top of just hearing for yourself who lost their mind and had to try to get it back in control, or at least begin to delusionally tell themselves that is what they have done, I would love to see proof that this child went to, quote, war even once. Or would he at that point blame his mental health problems on his supposed cage fighting?
He has a history of psychological trauma from boxing.
I was in the military. I used to fight as well. I heard you was a boxer. I did like some cage fighting for a while. Get my mind back in control, right? After being at war so many times.
He has emergence of grandiose messianic identity, and he becomes inconsistent and escalatingly violent when his terms are put under scrutiny.
Now, as I stated, I addressed false claims of false messiahs, not just in a conversation with this child here, this clown, but also in conversation with the other clown in the first conversation that we had. Let's see if I am inconsistent.
Maybe the disconnect here. This is what I'm meaning. You've heard of people such as David Koresh, or from what I know of on YouTube, there's like 3-4 people claiming they're the Messiah, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now the reason why they do that, of course, is because they never heard Yitzhak. None of these, David didn't hear of Yitzhak. None of these angels heard of Yitzhak. They saw. Hold on 1 moment.
You know, I love you. I love you.
No, wait, brother. Just hear me out. Just hear me out. What I'm meaning.
Okay.
The reason why they came to that conclusion, of course, is because they read out a profile in the book that they started to associate themselves with. Now, hold on 1 moment. Me and Solar talked about this in the very first interview that we had.
Himself and inform you guys of what he's going to be talking about today. So, without further ado, what's going on, Landy?
Thank you very much for that very warm introduction, Solar. And I'll begin here by stating that I'm aware that there have been quite a few who have now been claiming to be the Christ, and we're able to see that across history, of course. And what I'm going to do is to make sure that I don't miss out any detail is that I actually wrote out an introduction here, which I will be sharing. And of course, we're going to go from there. So people can find themselves reading passages from a book and find themselves relating to happenings or even characteristics in general, let alone when it comes to the books of the Bible, known as the Torah. The book can be used as a map as to if you find yourself in such a scenario in real life, you can be better guided as to what to do, if not already knowing better. And there have been times where someone thinks or feels themselves to relate so much that they have claimed to be Christ. Now, though that is a level and a title, when speaking of the actual line of David, it is indeed an historical line as well. The name Adam, which means humankind in Hebrew, also serves as an acronym that serves as a calendar or a clock, since Adam to David to Mashiach, which means Messiah or Christ.
And that is because, again, even when, I'm trying not to go too deep in a different direction. This is why I made the correlation between what we see with our very genetic code and even the original Hebrew script.
And in parallel to Hebrew having a triple root structure, DNA messages are written in 3-letter triplets, as 3 nucleotides makes up a codon. We see further signature of God embedded within our very genetic code, as the total permutations of one of the Hebrew names for God is 3 letters in 4 places, for a total amount of permutations of 64, and our very genetic code is 64 codons to 22 actions. Mathematically, a beautiful overlay of Yahweh, which we know is a total of 64 permutations, and the action of creating with 22 letters. This is reflected in our very genetic code. 64 codons to 22 actions. And further signature of God throughout the universe is the fact that the total permutations of all 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, the total permutations of that number 22 equates to an estimate of the total amount of stars in the universe. And as even further realization of as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul.
Of course, different people are going to see themselves in different points in times within the book. There are different, you're going to work right now. I don't know if there's someone in your workplace who feels like they were Saul, who feels like they were in some position of power, and now here comes you as a David, and now they feel threatened, and hold on, this kid does this better than me, or he's computer literate in this way, or
so you know that's the story of my life.
So what are we going to do, family? We're going to protect the nukes. We're going to stay away from these potential cult leaders and stop letting them play anymore. That's why I had to get him out of here. He hasn't given you any information, but what we have seen is he has the propensity to be violent, but more than anything, he has delusions of grandeur from different types of trauma. It's that simple. So now let's wrap this up. And I like that other slide. Hold on. You bearing your cross today, huh?
I'm not even one of these Hebrew Israelite Christians. These Hebrew Christian are like,
let's keep it popping. Unfulfilled duties. So for him to be the Messiah, we have to recognize he has not rebuilt the temple, he has not gathered the exiles, and he doesn't have any lineage to point to. These are three major daggers that we would expect the messianic figure to uphold. But instead, we see this brother using ad homs, attacking me, saying my so-called opponent, but not giving us any information. Whereas I just took this time to lay out a systematic, very easy to follow, very simple understanding of why I say he is not the promised biblical Davidic Messiah to come. And I think that I've proven my point beyond a shadow of a doubt. So now let's go back over it, right? When we look at this from a Christian messianic standpoint, this person will be born of a virgin. Now, whether you agree with that or not, or whether you want to say that virgin is of a marriageable age and not, not some supernatural event, it doesn't matter. He doesn't even talk about how he got here, except for being in Holland with Santa Claus, right? He has to come from the line of David. He says he doesn't need to.
How do you know for a fact that you're of the line of David or, the line of Judah?
Excellent. This is, in particularly, is why I recommend that whomever it is that is actually looking to debate me, actually look through my videos first, because I've placed all the evidence that I have forward laced throughout there so that you can, of course, study it, try to dissect it, not just via audio, but visually as well. In particular, right.
This person has to be Torah observant, but he tells us we don't have to worry about these books. We're just going to make it up as we go.
If someone tells me that when they look at the book of Luke and it doesn't match Genesis, it doesn't match Chronicles, to just say, oh, that's okay.
Now here listen closely, and you'll hear that after I explain the discrepancies between Genesis and Chronicles and what is called the book of Luke, this kid somehow takes that as me confirming the legitimacy of the book of Luke.
The genealogy there. And now the thing is, when you compare the book of Luke with Genesis and Chronicles, the genealogies don't match. In the book of Luke, after Arphaxad, it'll state that Arphaxad had a son, which was another Canaan, also named Canaan. And then it says in Luke that Canaan then had Selah. But when you look at Chronicles and when you look at Genesis, it goes from Arphaxad to Selah. And ultimately, those numbers, when you get to Jacob himself, come out to 22 generations since Adam, literally. And the reason why this is of importance is because in the book of Jubilees, it states that there were 22 acts of creation in particularly. And when you go down the list, from the beginning to, of course, to humankind itself, it is listed out 22 acts of creation. It's also held in the Sefer Yetzirah that God created the universe using 22 letters and 10 numbers, the number 10 being the basis of gematria still used today. And
but in that same thing, you're confirming the book of Luke rather than denying it.
Actually, brother, the thing is that I'm actually showing where the book of Luke has been corrupted.
And as you just saw the undeserved patience I had with someone who was ultimately a pretender, though he is disingenuous, he may not be faking being a complete idiot, as you're about to see here, that it may not be that he just misspoke when he goes on to say that Matthew, as in the person that the quote book of Matthew is named after, is one of the fathers of the line of David, as you're about to hear once more.
This is why you see the lineage in Matthew, and that's why many of us argue that there is no virgin birth, and definitely no immaculate conception. Instead, Matthew the daddy, Matthew the pappy, right? Because now you come through the proper lineage, which is proper Hebraic culture.
And here, in the thick of his brain fog, he refers to David being the seed of Solomon, which is of course the other way around.
Because the issue is not whether or not David was of the seed of Solomon.
You should suffer and resurrect, no matter how that looks. If you want to say it's supernatural, if you want to say that it's figurative, I'm good with it. But he didn't talk about any of that. And you have to have a global impact on both the Jews and the Gentiles. We don't even see him having a conversation about that. Right? Next, we want to look at the major themes of Orthodox Judaism. Torah observance, lineage from David, builder of the third temple, gathering of the exiles, establishing global peace, and recognition by the world. See, this is simple, family, when you just are in your right mind. But instead, we got this. We got this guy. Various misquoted Bible structures.
This is why you see the lineage in Matthew, and that's why many of us argue that there is no virgin birth, and definitely no immaculate conception. Instead, Matthew the daddy, Matthew the pappy, right? Because now you come through the proper lineage, which is proper Hebraic culture. Because the issue is not whether or not David was of the seed of Solomon.
Right? Rabbi Ginsburg's claims, genetic load, dietary rejuvenation, and this self-appointed nonsense. Understand this in my last 30 seconds. Your self-appointing of being the Messiah does not equal an anointing. I'll say it again. You self-appointing yourself as the biblical Messiah does not equal an anointing. You are not the person that we have been looking for, and you have been found wanting. In my last 4 seconds, I'll say this. You got beat up today because you were too arrogant to deal with this correctly. I appreciate y'all. I'll see y'all in my rebuttal.
Now, after this, there was supposed to be a, quote, rebuttal round and some rapid fire round where we are going back and forth. But as per the previous debates that they saw me in, they simply knew I was going to completely tear this kid apart. And on top of that, I warned the clown, James, that when it comes to him speaking to me in that little, quote, shuffle buck round that he has where some little wannabe think tank puts together some questions for him to try to present, I warned him that I was going to, in essence, crush him when he speaks to me. So here we'll watch a little bit of what they obviously planned ahead of time to do. Just as, for example, every time the kid James called me, just by chance this character would happen to be available, as they of course would get together first before those moments as well. But here we're about to see that they had absolutely no intentions of engaging me whatsoever. And hilariously enough, why they literally agreed to even go this far, as it only served to embarrass themselves all the more.
This is the Solar Vision Debate League. We are now going into the rebuttal round. So we're going to hand this thing over to Landy. Landy, it is on you. It is on you, Landy. Whenever you're ready, you can begin your rebuttal. Cameras are on.
Now, anybody with any experience using StreamYard and then from there streaming it live from YouTube, not only am I of course sure what this kid pulled wasn't rocket science, but it's all the more asinine thinking that others aren't gonna know what it was that he did. So here I'm going to show an immediate and brief review of what happened, and then we'll finish this up from there. To any of you actual angels, whether you know it or not, it is a literal fact, who tuned into this slaughter earlier on, just as you see here, reading it yourself, these kids got so freaked out and scared by this truth that just as you see, they ran. And as you're reading here, he placed this conversation in a mode where only the quote host could hear me and completely muted me out from anybody. And the way that of course I came to find this out, as you're seeing, is I was recording on another phone and I walk over and they're pulling this whole nonsense on quote YouTube as if I'm running from this loser, which as you're seeing here, not only wore a mask to this, like somebody who really stands behind what they believe, but look at the animation of him putting two girls beside him like a 12-year-old punk kid who's never had a girlfriend before in his life. This is what we are dealing with. There are none that can oppose this actual truth by the grace of God.
You there, Landy? You're muted.
Now once more, sticking to what I said I would do, during this time I was in that backstage mode just like this, waiting to hear this child. But just like I just said, it wasn't until I went over and checked the recording on the other phone, streaming directly from YouTube, that I heard what they were actually doing. And from the backstage, unmuting myself, which reflects here, yet you still cannot hear me.
Can you hear me, A9? A9, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you, fam. You want me to go?
No, we trying to see what's up with Landy. Landy, are you there?
And showing all the more that these kids had this planned. Here you heard this punk say, "Do you want me to go?" when it was him that tried to establish the parameters of this debate, from me allowing him to name the title to the amount of time from the opening to the premise. And literally at the beginning of this, you heard him say everything else standard, to now trying to act as if he's confused as to who goes next.
So is any suggestions before we begin? Any extensions of the premise, or did we get a customized premise, or are we going with the standard format?
5:15, and everything else standard.
Okay.
So of course, these clowns are just going through the motions of what they planned earlier in regards to how they were going to go about running and trying to play off that there were some sort of technical difficulties here, knowing full well they were about to get ripped apart.
I don't know. Look like Landy. I don't know what's going on with Landy. He unmuted his mic, but Landy, can you hear me?
And once more, at this point, I was in a quote backstage setting where I wasn't hearing them at all, and it wasn't until I went over and checked the other phone, which I was recording from, which that is why I sent him over the opening and the premise, because I was going to be doing this over a phone. It wasn't until I walked over and checked that recording where I could actually hear what they were trying to pull.
I don't know. It seemed to be there, but we can't hear you. You gotta hook your mic up or something. Alright, I guess we'll go with A9 for the rebuttal to start it off. Let him get a situation together. A9, it is on you. You got 10 minutes, brother. You there, A9? A9.
I'm here. No, his mask giving the brother a promise. I took a break. Hold on.
All right.
Let me bring everything up for you. Oh, hold on. Let me turn on my camera. Sorry.
All right.
All right.
Whenever you're ready, you can begin.
All right. This 10 minutes.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna be honest with y'all, man. I don't even know how I'm gonna do 10 minutes of this. This is horrible. Okay, I'm just about to do it this way. Sorry. You see my slide move?
Do I see a what? You said, do I see what?
I can share right now, right? I'm sharing.
All right, hold on.
I just want to use my logical fallacies.
And now, like the geniuses that they are, they again show all the more that they planned this ahead of time, as you're about to hear this kid just bring up some generic slide that he uses time and time again and just try to nitpick what certain things may kind of stick to the wall, as he tried to say at the beginning.
See, here's the problem. Like, you see that confetti rising up in the air? That's what he's going to do today with his argument. He's going to throw things on the wall to see what sticks. We call that a gish gallop.
And as you're seeing here, he is simply hoping that others are somehow even dumber than he is and the other clown is, just as they've been hoping for prior.
So,
all right. Yeah, right. Yeah, he's up.
All right, let's go. Start my clock. All right, 10 minutes. Let's go. All right, now it's time to rebut. I mean, let's go. I'll try to make this go 10 minutes. So let's deal with a few logical fallacies, fam. My only regret, this is what I'm saying, my only regret is that I couldn't do my screenshots the way that I was wanting to. Otherwise, this would look so much better. So let's get to it. The first issue that we have is, like I said, this was a gish gallop, right? So what he tried to do was throw a bunch of things on the wall to see what stick. In other words, he wanted to see if he could throw out Rabbi Ginsburg and throw out the pineal gland and throw out all the calcified stuff. And then in the process, maybe if he threw a couple of ad homs, right? My so-called opponent, he wants to deal with the Romanized church, all of these things, right? Just so then he could live in a appeal to authority, right? So let's really break this down. Let's really look at this. You took a gish gallop, which is throwing things on the wall, then running to ad homs, and then running to an appeal to authority, which then ended up with a ton of red herrings. And this is where I'll start really my rebuttal, right? So to say that Ezekiel 37 proves that he is the Messiah, he would need to go into a deep spiritual teaching or deep spiritual understanding of why he represents one of those two sticks, instead of just saying the tribe of Ephraim is indigenous or Native American in some way, shape, or form, and then we didn't see any proof of his DNA, though, right? Notice when it comes to Hebrews, we got to show our DNA. We got to do all of this stuff. I saw no evidence of this brother's DNA, but yet and still he gets to claim that he has some type of lineage through that perspective. But then come right back and say, oh, we don't need the lineage, right? This is so insane. And that's why I told you the argument was completely incoherent and inconsistent. Next, the point that he was making about the calcified pineal gland. Okay, that's great. Sure. How does any of that prove that he's the Messiah? This is the issue. The entire conversation that we had the whole time was, how does any of this tie you into being the promised biblical Davidic Messiah? And it didn't happen. None of it hit. Right? This Peter guy who is created some type of skull helmet that he wanted me. Look.
Further showing that this kid was planning on just running the entire time. He didn't even take any actual notes during this opening or the premise, as very clearly the angel's name he was trying to refer to is Michael Persinger.
Listen, fam, the guy really literally wanted me to use my resources to go and find somebody whose brother is a cop, just so he could say, see, I told you he existed.
And now you see here once again the incompetence of these clowns is to the extent that they are either forgetting this is recorded or truly just hope that you are not of the competence to remember, let alone go back and look once more for yourselves. And of course, one can't expect them to send me over the conversation, but very simply, he was told that proof that I am actually doing what I am saying that I am is the fact that there is a person who is not brought up on any Google satellite or any other satellite, any ATM machine camera, any stoplight camera, any gas station camera, any store camera, any type of camera, video whatsoever for coming up on 3 years now. How would I know that about this person in specifically if I am not doing exactly as I'm saying that I am? So I told this person that the way he could try to prove that I'm not is simply by going and finding that person, showing them up on camera, and trying to make me look, quote, stupid at that point. But he cannot, because this is completely true. And then he wanted to try to initially act like he was Liam Neeson from the movie Taken, as if he had some particular set of tracking skills. He went from that to freezing up when he must have ran into something here, and literally just trying to deny that this would be relevant whatsoever and that I'm trying to make people up. So the two angels that I showed at the end of the premise were two angels that know the person in specific that I'm speaking of, and of course were even corresponding with me about that particular person. So again, this is completely true by the grace of God, whether it scares them or not.
This is the type of circular nonsense that I had to go through to get to this debate, but I wanted to work on this because I needed to get back in action. When you break down the entirety, complexity of this argument, what it basically boils down to is a bunch of red herrings to try to throw you off the scent of the fact that he can't prove that he's the promised biblical Davidic Messiah. Like when we get to the point where he's talking about the genetic radio frequency in your DNA being able to transmit frequency. First off, that's pseudo.
Again, you can go into each one of the processes that I've described, and you will see that it is not pseudoscience whatsoever. That's this little child shaking because he knows, and so does the other clown, and so do the rest of them, and including even the little punks doing this. And I'm meaning with a sort of souped up transcranial magnetic stimulation device on their heads. They know that they are doing absolutely nothing like this. And once more, even the little punks running around doing this, when they take off their little minion looking helmet, looking like one of the members of the Cool Runnings bobsled team, they know that there was absolutely nothing outside of just hearing, as you are, of course, usually accustomed to.
Right? But let's just say, for instance, it is. Let's just say, okay, he has a point.
And that just showed you right there how scared these children are. If they really thought that I was going off of some comic book or some science fiction like that, why would he even entertain that I have a point?
Once again, where does that line up with the biblical explanation of him being the promised Davidic Messiah? Even when he goes to Rabbi Ginsburg, right? Even when he goes to Rabbi Ginsburg, if you study Rabbi Ginsburg, his entire point is to talk to you from a spiritual perspective while still holding on to the Orthodox foundation, which would say someone has to come from the lineage of David, which would say that this Messiah has to have control of their temperament and not threaten to fight people, not talk about people's wives, not do all of this craziness, right? But instead, this guy keeps leaning to that because he wanted to lead to a self-appointed level so that way he could move into a position of grandeur. This is why I talked about these psychological profiles. And you better be glad I didn't have enough time to really do what I wanted to do with it.
And as I stated earlier, this child I allowed to not only choose the title of this quote debate, but he also, as you see here, chose the length of time for the opening, the premise, and the rest, as you see here, including, just as you saw at the very beginning, the other punk asked him if he wanted to extend the opening or the premise, and he says no.
So is any suggestions before we begin? Any extensions of the premise, or did we get a customized premise, or are we going with the standard format?
5:15, and everything else standard.
Okay.
So now moving on, he says something about telepathy. Even if the brother could prove that he was telepathic, which he's not, but even if he could prove he was telepathic, I'm gonna tell you how I know he wasn't telepathic, because he didn't know this butt kicking was coming tonight.
Now here we have another classic example of a clown wanting to sound smart and not having any idea what he is talking about. As sometimes we see things such as what unfortunately is one of the things science currently denies, as it can't explain it, such as deja vu and things of that nature, letting us know things are indeed for a reason, as though God gives its gifts
throughout our lives in the ways in which it does.
However, there are distinct differences between clairvoyance, what he was just talking about, and telepathy.
But even if he could prove he was telepathic, you still have to show us a profile of this being the messianic prescription for whomever you're talking about. Then he talks about this different water situation in your DNA. Like I stopped taking notes after that point because it just became so pseudo. When we start to deal with the conversation, the conversation about the Y haplogroups, I am going to spend a little time here because this is very important. We should be able to track a lineage. We should be able to track a bloodline. Like I said, from a male perspective, I'm EM180. So is my father. So is my son. Right?
One more time, this kid is just hoping he is speaking to those that have very low level intelligence, as he has no idea what he's talking about, and siblings with the same mother and father are able to have different haplogroups. And even if they had the same haplogroups, where therein would still lie your problem as to which sibling it is that you are related to, let alone if you're talking about trying to go back any substantial amount of time whatsoever.
So that is a genetic marker that I can follow through the ages, down the line. Now, obviously, we do see splits and we see offsets and we see changes in these things, but we're going to keep it a buck. Like, if I ask you to prove your genetics when you say that you have the ability to prove a lineage, the only thing you should be able to say is, oh, here you go. If you're telling me that you're the Messiah, especially when you argue that Messiah Yeshua is disqualified because his genealogy didn't line up the way you wanted it in Luke. Think about that. He literally said that Jesus' genealogy was wrong, so that disqualified him. But then when it was time to ask him for his genealogy, oh no, that's the white man's science, basically.
Now once more, he shows to be operating in a complete mode of brain fog, as what I said was that the genealogy in Luke was corrupted between Arphaxad and Shelah. Nothing about a genealogy of a Jesus, outside of the fact that it is completely asinine to think that this genealogy is speaking about Mary, let alone when it begins speaking of Joseph. Then the very fact that the line went from David to Solomon, not Nathan. And his racist remark is exactly that, his just self-projecting all the more, as he already knows that I have already further proven that all come from Adam and Eve.
Yeah, that's poppycock, right? No, it's not. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you need to hold someone else accountable, then I have the right to hold you accountable. What we see clearly this evening was he couldn't come up with a profile. That's probably why he's not here.
And now, not only as you would expect from any fool, but giving a lie enough time, and it will be revealed as such in time. As this kid just said, it's probably why I'm not there. Literally exposing all the more that they purposely placed me into this backstage mode to try to play it off to those on YouTube as if I'm not there or just simply left. Actual clowns.
I wouldn't be surprised if he unplugged his laptop. We'll see. But he couldn't come up with a profile. And since he couldn't come up with a profile, he decided to red herring and gish gallop and throw silly arguments out all night. But he got the right one tonight, family. He got the right one. And so from here on out, I'm trying to think, like I took notes, but I know I've covered everything. And I really don't want to keep going on and beleaguering the point. What we know for a fact is he didn't prove his point. He never proved that he was the promised biblical Davidic Messiah. He never proved that he could put together a proper profile. He never proved that his inconsistent model, which I showed, actually lines up with being a profile. Instead, Like I told you, he gave you Gish Gallop, appeal to authority, and red herring after red herring. So it's clear what happened tonight. I don't want to keep wasting brothers and sisters' time. I've addressed everything that was needed to talk about. Game over. I yield the rest of my time.
All right. Shout out to A9 for his rebuttal. We're going to keep this thing rocking and rolling. We're going to pass it over to Landy. Landy, you have 10 minutes to rebut A9. Let me take down his screen. Are you ready now, Landy?
Now, James, in a discussion with these two, not in this particular video, but between these two, showed before that he starts to feel like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain and starts getting mute happy. Eventually, one of them dropping off and another person entering the conversation that James ultimately just dropped off, brought back on to try to drop him back off again, almost like a preteen. So I laugh at the fact that he couldn't help but hope for these very moments where he feels like he's in control in the moment against who says they're the very Christ. As when you look back through my sharings, I have embarrassed these kids against the truth in every single interaction there has been. They all have been caught lying, literally, while recorded on camera. Each of them, literally, as you're about to see here. Now in this first clip, if you watch this video through its entirety, it's them that began with their talk such as "where's he at" and things like that led up to moments such as you're seeing here.
Goliath. The same line that slayed Goliath. The same line that slayed Goliath. The same line that slayed Goliath. Just like that.
You deserve this. You deserve this because you put blasphemy on the name of God.
You kids are nowhere close to me.
Let me help you out, sir.
You're nowhere close to me.
The word Messiah or Christ means anointed with oil.
That's why I said, do you see a Zadok priest around here? And you kids were saying that was nowhere close to... You literally just said I was correct.
Hold on.
You literally just said I was correct.
Hold on. You went into the Evenite.
No. Hold on. Because when I first said that, you kids said it didn't have to do anything with the priest. Okay, let's slow down. Let's slow down. Hold on. No, we're going to address one thing at a time. No, you just proved that I was correct. Until you, who was the person that said it didn't involve a priest? What was that?
I got you. You've already pissed on the floor. I got you.
No, not even close. I'm the one that said, where is the priest? I'm the one who said.
So now we're gonna go back to where these real geniuses, and I have to state here, not knowing whom is watching this, obviously that is said with a lot of sarcasm, said that anointing had nothing to do with a priest.
You claim that you're Christ. That
I am it.
like you claim that you're anointed, but you can't even answer a simple question that a baby can answer.
What does even the word anointed mean? Do I have a priest, a Zadokite priest next to me?
Oh, it don't have nothing to do with a priest. That anointing don't have to do with a priest.
Look up the definition of anointing.
It has nothing to do with a priest. Can we stop running
know
around?
what you're talking about.
Our salvation.
Before we move on, can you do
that? Messiah or Christ means anointed with oil.
That's why I said, do you see a Zadok priest around here? And you kids were saying that was nowhere close to... You literally just said I was correct. You too.
And when you look back through my sharings, you will see once more that in every interaction with anyone whom has been associated with James, it has been just a complete highlight on my part. And as I said, they're not exactly neuroscientists or anything like that ran from me and literally have been caught lying, literally while being recorded at every single interaction. So though they didn't have to go to seminary school or have degrees or have any quote PhDs and the titles of doctor that I've been absolutely wiping myself with and showing that just as God reigns supreme, so does it continue to reveal that our actual history does over all lies.
Mind giving you a copy of anything so you can go do your Christian Hebrew shuffle. I know how you guys operate. I'm going.
He wants the audio as well.
I'm giving it to you. I'm not. He might do seance over that audio or something like that. Put some spell on that shit. Nah, man. No.
I want you to say that you'll give me a copy of this. Okay, one more time. Because you're not answering questions, and I don't mind giving you a copy of anything.
I'm gonna do like Chief Calloway. I mean Dan Calloway do. Send me $100. I'll give it to you. There you go. You know what I'm saying? There you go. Pay solar. No matter.
He wants to critique the conversation, though. He wants to.
There ain't nothing to critique.
Yeah.
Now, anyone of any common sense whatsoever would literally come to the conclusion that if that were the case, why wouldn't he just give the recording of the conversation? But the fact of the matter is that Chris knows he got intellectually chased around and made serious blunders, such as stating that the Dead Sea Scrolls were all written in Greek. And here we'll continue on with another.
Not only these things, but the law itself and the prophets and the rest of the books have no small difference when they are spoken in their own language. So he's going to give you a narrative according to English interpretation of Christianity. But I'm going to give you from my culture, my people, the Bantu, Hebrews, the Igbos. Peter said that the earth was standing in and out of water, but the heavens were of old. This is not a creation, is what the prophet Peter said.
I could have stopped this at a multitude of points, but as you see here once more, this kid is strictly a Roman agent. He may have had hand in voting for their last quote-unquote pope. Now here we get to my little punk James. And don't feel too singled out, child, as ultimately this goes for whomever your higher ups are that had your little punk self comfortable enough to do such dumb things like this for whatever time that lasted. But just speaking objectively here, you can tell ultimately, as weak and cowardly as he is right now as a grown quote man, you know that this was the type of kid all throughout his teenage years and so forth that was always an instigator. A cowardly little instigator that never actually fought himself. And you see the expressions of this catching up to him now as a grown, quote, man. That this preteen type behavior is all you see from this clown. So here we'll move on to some instances where James really thought he had something, but unfortunately, just like the rest of them, they are weighed, they are measured, and they are left wanting.
Oh, perfect. So, okay, this is talking about the first man, Adam.
Now, unfortunately, Solar thought he had one in a gotcha moment here. But once more, as you see here, this in chapter 5 is indeed also speaking of Adam the first, as he read out, in the likeness of God made it him, Adam.
Now, remember, you began.
You just said yes, right?
Hold on. Remember,
you just said yes.
You're talking about chapter 5, correct?
Yes. When it said, okay, so this is talking about the first man, Adam.
Hold on.
As there, he tried to conflate this with the instances where Adam, the first man, previously.
You just said yes!
You said this was talking about Eve.
I didn't say nothing about Eve. What are you talking about? When I read to you in chapter 5, you said that this Adam is talking about what? When it says, Adam, I named them. I didn't say nothing about Eve. What are you talking about? I named them. I didn't say nothing about Eve. What are you talking about? I named them. I didn't say nothing about Eve. What are you talking about?
Well, let's clarify. Ask your question again. Don't worry.
It's an art to listening, bro. It's an art to listening, bro. It's an art to listening, bro.
Indeed, there is an art to listening. And now Solar knows all the more how artful the Christ, by the grace of God, truly is.
My question would be, like, didn't they reject Christ for the same reason, the actual Christ of the Bible? Didn't they reject him because they just ain't like, his energy and all that stuff you're saying?
Yeah, they rejected him, but
so don't it look like you're doing the same thing? If he's actually the Christ, let's just assume that, then you're doing the same thing like what they did in the Bible.
You know he's not the Christ.
I don't know if he's the Christ or not. I don't know. I'm dead serious. I don't know.
And where that man at?
So I've been following for years now.
Hey,
real rap though. I don't know if he's the Christ or not. I don't know.
But you're not trying to say, because I respect your platform though.
No, it ain't about that. I don't know.
I mean, you don't know though. I mean, that ain't a good reason though.
I don't know if he's the Christ or not. Now, the better question is, do I think that he is? Do I think that he is? But I don't know. He could be. He could be the Christ.
But what do you think then? Let's say that.
No, I don't think that he is.
I want to know what he think. Where is Christ at? I know his signal.
But I'll be one of the ones burning in the lake of fire for denying the Christ. And you'll be right along with me. You'll be right along with me burning in the lake of fire for denying Christ in the second coming, brother. Landy. I'll meet your mic, brother.
Now, though the visual is continuing to play, this is me speaking in a review via voiceover, of course.
Landy, are you there, bro?
It's sad to watch these clowns carry on with their charades.
Yeah, hold on a second, y'all.
But in a moment here, you're going to see that even when off mute, as of course from that quote backstage placement, I still was not able to be heard while they were carrying on with their lie ultimately, which again, you will all reap as you sow.
All right, Landy, are you there, bro? I don't know what's up going on with Landy. He had his camera on. I don't know if it was some type of technical difficulties, but it looks like he's up here and he has his mic on mute.
And in further showing how he would love for others to think how these types of technical difficulties just so happen to happen with him, in the last quote debate I partook in, where I completely annihilated another one of these children, another one of these clowns, you will see that the entire premise that I laid out wasn't shown at all.
Remember, because I believe that portion of it wasn't even being shown. I had to look on my phone. When I looked on my phone, it looked like it was like a black screen. But that's the risk that you get when you're relying on somebody else to do something for you. And I didn't do that intentionally, but it was
I assume that somebody must have texted you from the chat or something, because I don't pick up my phone at all during the debate until the shucklebuck round. Until I submit the score, my phone is off. I'm not looking at it or doing anything. So I assume that somebody else had to bring it to your attention.
No. I actually just went to my phone.
Okay.
I went to my phone to look at it because I know that the streams sometimes does that, and I was using the All right, tried to call the brother. He didn't answer the phone.
Now once more, I had a phone recording in another room so that there wouldn't be any echo or interference in the background. I saw that he did indeed call me. However, he also knew that I was doing this off of a phone. And not only that, it's very clear by now, had I answered the phone, this pretender would have just tried to carry on with his charades, trying to act as if innocent to me when clearly he's not. And child, you will pay. You and anyone else you want to consider way out of your league, whatever fools it is that you fear, you will pay.
I don't know, Nah. This is looking like I don't know. I think
Hey, you. Hey.
I don't want to say it yet. You know what I mean?
You gotta. Hey, look. I'm gonna tell you how I knew this was gonna happen, bro.
And now, of course, by now it should be all the more clear to you that the reason that this little kid knew this was going to happen is because, again, they pre-orchestrated this together. And though, of course, there should be no need for any further interactions after this finalization of this complete, utter, cerebral crushing, this complete annihilation. However, though anyone with any logic at this point would be like, why is the king focusing his energy on these literal underlings who have proven to be nothing more but weak little pathetic lying cowards? And the fact is, there's still a micro example of what will happen in the macro to any other who really think themselves playing God, when ultimately you will reap what you sow, and you have been weighed, you have been measured, and you will be left wanting, as you are not walking in its ways, so thus you are not blameless. And just as I told you both, the last time you both called me together, and of course goes as a macro for any, you all like to be very important when you think it benefits you, and you all like to try to hide and wish you could just disappear when you think it doesn't. And you children will reap what you sow.
I'm gonna tell you how I knew this was gonna happen, bro. I'm finna show you my last slide. Remember we was talking about, remember when he tried to talk about my wives and all of that? And what I say? It was just gonna be another Tuesday night.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, share my screen, bro.
All right, bro. You know. Landy, like, yo, what's going on? Where you at, Landy? Like, what's going on?
Hey, boy, I told you not to do this, bro. Hey, shout out to my queens, bro. Shout out to my queens, bro. Hey, y'all better stop playing with my family, bro.
Yo.
Not only does this pretender saying that he knew this was gonna happen just make these things all the more obvious, but obviously what women would actually be with this clown?
You know. Hey, look. What I'll do is I'm going to I am going to post Blue's link. I'm gonna post my man Blue link inside of the chat, and he's gonna do the post debate show.
Shut out the Blue.
To post debate show will be on Blue's channel. Alright. So, there you go. That's the link for the post debate show. Landy, are you there? Tried to call the brother. So I don't want no, you know what I mean? You know how people do when this type of shit happened. They'll call me like 5 minutes after the stream ended. Like, what happened? I was ready. No, nigga, we was waiting for you, and we can't hear shit. I called you. You know what I'm saying? You didn't say nothing. You're not saying nothing now. Your mic's on mute. Okay, it's all good. I told y'all about fucking with A9. I told y'all niggas. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. He came, he saw, and he conquered. Leave that man alone. I told y'all not to be fucking with A9. I told y'all niggas, y'all seen what he did in season 3. Y'all seen how he came in. He took the title. Y'all niggas better watch out for A9.
And it's ultimately hilarious that he mentions all of those things, as you all just saw this kid terrified, completely did everything he could to run from me. And this would go for anyone this kid James even knows, let alone his little punk self. So once more, though this should be the last instance in which I need to blot out you little punks, just like this happened to you all, there are none other on this earth that ever have been or that ever will be that can do anything to disrupt this truth by the grace of Yahweh. And whomever thinks that my behavior here was too harsh towards these little clowns, look into the actual history since Adam to David to Mashiach.
Not show up and, you know, quit or whatever. He left his avatar up there and was on mute and just didn't want to hit that unmute button because the information was too powerful. He pierced through the soul of this man. Damn.
This y'all God, bro. This y'all king.
Further overkill of this coward contradicting himself.
Believer Christian type. I'm not even one of these Hebrew Israelite Christians. These Hebrew Christians are like who still hold on to a lot of this hocus pocus. I do agree. You are as good as advertised, right? You do have a way that you go about proving it. And so, you know, I'm just crazy enough to go ahead and put it to the test. So,
listen.
A9, talk to me. What's good?
And though it's one thing coming together for a debate, here James is just expressing that he really just likes listening to males.
The debate, tried to do something else, like dude got real cocky. Dude actually started challenging to a fight, started talking about, you know, my home life and all of that. And so yeah.
And this other kid trying to overcompensate, talking about wives and such, which who knows what he even says about a fiance is true.
So, yeah. Yeah, you know, I want to say this before I close out. You know, it's going to be a very interesting season 6. You know, it's going to be a very interesting season 6. The top tier debaters are the top tier debaters. You know what I'm saying? So you run into a top tier debater, you want to get some top tier debater work. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, okay, you could, you know, it's all good. Nothing, you know what I'm saying? It's all good. Just know that when you're live, there are people watching you, bro. This is recorded history now. You can't run to your stream and try to create another narrative and do this and that. You know, it was your time to talk and you refused to talk. And I believe that if it wasn't no technical difficulties, which normally somebody would answer the phone and tell me or call me, then that means that the information pierced through this man's soul.
Yeah.
It was so truth revealing to him. I'll be one of the ones burning in the lake of fire for denying the Christ. Landy. Alright, so look, man. Post debate shows on Blue Channel. Maybe Landy can explain to us what happened. You know, maybe it's some type of technical difficulty.
And there, as you saw, some more of the habit of trying to bring somebody up on stage to bring them back down, as this little punk isn't all that creative, and his little circles incriminate himself.
Maybe.
Hey, y'all gonna give me my credit, bro. I caught a whole body on live internet.
And speaking of him not being all that creative and only further incriminating himself, while I was in this, quote, backstage mode, coming on and off of mute, of course I was laughing at them when it is that I caught them in what they were doing. And then at a moment where he thinks that it would be advantageous to him to actually show me on the screen, further showing that all of a sudden he could do such a thing, you will also see that I come on and off of mute multiple times, and in either case you still cannot hear me. And also going further, I even show of course what they were running from, outside of their stomachs turning at the thought of even having to speak to me directly, but also the pages full of errors that were about to be knocked over this child's head, which of course they ran from, but ultimately in trying to run, they just showed the cowards that they are and embarrassed themselves perhaps even further than would have been done that night if they would have taken their whippings like men. And throughout this conversation, if you were never sure that you ever heard a fake laugh before in an attempt to mask fear, I'm sure you've become an expert after watching this clinic.
You see, Landy's back. Landy's back.
It is important to know that no matter how close you think you are,
Landy's back. What's going on, Landy?
This nigga's clown.
And once more, how hilarious it is that the, quote, grown man who goes out and looks for masks to put onto his face in order to play pretend is calling anybody a clown. And I'll let this play out just so you can see once more that I was unmuted, but it just so happens that you could not hear me.
Landy.
We can't hear you, Chewy.
We can't hear you, Landy.
I don't even know what that is.
Is your mic on mute? I mean, your mic's off mute, but we can't hear you, brother. Brother, what's going on right now? You don't know with the mic? He's
Isn't
talking, but he's on mute.
Isn't that convenient?
We can't hear you. Okay, all right. So, with that being said,
And speaking of a laugh, in order to mask fear, notice how this boy came to an abrupt stop as soon as the visual of me appeared back onto his screen. Soon I blow kisses at these B words.
What's going on with your camera?
The other one's so nervous, he forgets he sees my camera is working.
What the fuck is going on right now? Why don't you unmute your mic, bro? You're on mute.
And there you just heard this cowardly little pretender further expose himself as he just said, unmute your mic, you're on mute, and you see clearly I'm not, as he knows that I am not. But you see here that this behavior is universal amongst these insecure, intimidated little puppies, and of course I don't do any of the animals any justice while making reference to these cowards. But just as you see here with these members of the so-called deconstruction zone, an atheist community on TikTok and YouTube whom so-called champions have just about all blocked me, literally deciding to run from me, while the point of their quote going lives are to invite those to try to defend the truth of God. And of course, they decide to block and run from me. You would think they would be having a field day with what is supposed to be a quote false messiah. But they turned out getting embarrassed just like these children here have. And as I said before, anyone else in the world that tries to dare come against this truth.
You're on mute. We can't hear you, bro. All right, look, I'm gonna just go ahead and end the stream.
Man,
go over to Blue's channel. I put the link inside of the chat room. I'll do it again. Put the link inside of the chat room.
Shout out to the league, man. I'll praise the Most High. You know what I'm saying? I got love for y'all. I'm back home. Y'all know what it is. It's up.
All right.
And outside of those very corny trademark phrases like repeating that 3 times over and such, again, I warned you about taking the Lord's name in vain. And boys, you will pay. And in closing here, and as I said, now that I've completely obliterated these little punks who were caught just being the clowns that they are this easily, tell me, little boys, do you think God doesn't know what it is that you're doing? Being that you just got exposed like this where you thought you'd be so surfacely safe? You're all about to witness the numbers of those who know this truth completely blossom, to say the least. And even children will be laughing at you, literally, for all of history. By the grace of Yahweh.
This is recorded history now.
It'll be as God allows it. Don't feel like we have to rush this, because ultimately, we're talking about all of history. We're talking about world history.
And as is very clear, this is like 2 punk kids against a professional soldier. This is like some part-time hobbyist against a full-time gladiator, a full-time warrior. This was 2 mentally enslaved punks against a king, by the grace of Yahweh.